Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reborn in Bleach and got married to the goddesses of Hueco Mundo, Harribel and Nelliel. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The King Without a Kingdom. The moon of Hueco Mundo was a liar. It hung in the perpetual night, a cracked skull bleached by an indifferent eternity, offering light but no warmth. Its glow fell upon a desert of bone-white sand, where crystalline trees clawed at the black sky, skeletal and silent. In this world, survival was a question asked every second, and the answer was always violence. He moved through this desolation not as a creature of it, but as a predator apart. He called himself Kageyama. It meant Shadow Mountain, a name he'd plucked from the echoing void of his fragmented memories. It felt right. He was a silent, looming presence in a world of shrieking monsters. He was tall, with a lean, corded build honed by endless conflict. Spikes of sun-blonde hair, stark against the monochrome landscape, fell around a face that was half man, half beast. A mask of pristine white bone, like a fox's lower jaw, covered his mouth and chin, its jagged fangs pointing downward. Above it, his eyes were a startling, impossible blue, holding a depth that did not belong in this hollow world. A tattered black hakama, cinched with a white sash, was all he wore, the fabric whisper. Ing against the sand with his every step. He was hunting, not for sustenance. He was far beyond the need to devour lesser souls, but for purpose. Hunting was the only thing that silenced the deep, aching loneliness that was the true curse of this place. He stalked the dunes, his senses stretched taut, feeling the vibrations in the spiritual particles, the reishi, that composed everything here. He felt the frantic scuttling of weak sand-crawler hollows, the lumbering passage of a brutish Ajukas, and, far to the east, a spike of rage and desperation. He ignored it. Other people's fights were not his concern. His only rule was to survive, and survival meant solitude. Alliances were for the weak, kingdoms for the delusional. His attention settled on a ripple in the reishi ahead. Something was burrowed deep, masking its presence. He stopped, planting his feet in the sand, the world falling into a preternatural stillness around him. He could feel the thrum of its malefic energy, a low hum of hunger. He closed his eyes, focusing. The sand before him was flat, undisturbed. A trap. He didn't smile. The mask made it impossible, but a flicker of something like amusement lit his eyes. He took a single, deliberate step forward. The desert erupted. A colossal, centipede-like hollow, its body armored in overlapping plates of black bone, burst from the sand, a dozen pairs of scythe-like legs churning the air. Its mask was a circular maw lined with concentric rings of needle-sharp teeth, and a piercing shriek of triumph tore from it as it lunged. Kageyama didn't move. He simply raised his right hand, palm open. A pinprick of brilliant blue light appeared, then began to spin, its sound a high-pitched whine that escalated into a grinding roar. It was not the chaotic blast of a normal Sero. This was controlled, compressed. A vortex of destructive energy held in his palm. A Rasen-Sero. The centipede was meters away, its maw gaping, when he thrust his hand forward. The spiraling sphere of energy met the creature's face. There was no grand explosion. Instead, the Rasen-Sero drilled. Bone and sinew and condensed spiritual matter were ground into dust, the spiraling energy chewing a perfect, cauterized tunnel straight through the creature's long body. The monster's triumphant shriek died in a choked gurgle. Its momentum carried its now hollowed-out corpse forward, the two halves collapsing on either side of him with a heavy, grinding crunch. He lowered his hand, the last vestiges of blue light fading from his fingertips. He hadn't even shifted his stance. He was about to turn an R. Assume his hunt when that distant spike of Ryutsu flared again, sharper this time, laced with a raw, defiant desperation that resonated with something ancient and buried within him. Curiosity, a dangerous indulgence, won out. He turned his head, his blue eyes narrowing. With a flicker of movement that was less a step and more a tear in the fabric of space, he vanished. He reappeared atop a towering, crystalline dune. The world spread out below him. A battle raged in a shallow basin. He recognized one of the combatants by reputation. Harribel, a vasto lord of considerable power, known for her aloofness and the 3 fiercely loyal Arankar who served as her fracken. They were in trouble. Their opponent was a mountain of muscle and arrogance, a bull-headed Arankar whose Ryutsu was a crude, bludgeoning force. 2 massive, curved horns grew from his temples, and his skin was a patchwork of scars. His power was immense, eclipsing Harribel's own, and he fought with a glee that turned Kageyama's cold indifference to ice. "Still you struggle, Queen of the Wasteland." The brute, Grolg, bellowed, his voice a gravelly avalanche. He backhanded one of Harribel's fracken, a live, snake-like Arankar named Sun Sun, sending her tumbling through the sand. "Your pride is meaningless. I will be the new king of Hueco Mundo, and you will be my first acquisition. We serve only Lady Harribel." A hot-headed, lion-like Arankar, Apache, screamed, lunging at him. Grolg swatted her aside like a fly. The third, a muscular, stag-like woman named Mila Rose, tried to create distance, firing a volley of Saros. But the bull Arankar simply absorbed them into his hierro, his iron-hard skin, laughing as they dissipated. Harribel herself was a vision of focused fury. Her olive skin was slick with sweat, her green eyes blazing. A portion of her hollow mask, resembling a shark's jaw, covered the lower half of her face, mirroring Kageyama's own. She held her Zanpakuto, a massive, broad-bladed weapon, in a 2-handed grip. Its hollow center a testament to its unique nature. "You are a pig, Grolg," she said, her voice muffled but clear. "You mistake brute force for true strength. Strength is what wins," he roared, charging her, "and I have more of it." Harribel was fast. She met his charge, her blade clashing with his thick, bone-armored forearms. She fought with a fluid, water-like grace, her movements economical and precise. But Grolg was a sledgehammer. For every elegant parry, he responded with a blow that shook the very ground. He was wearing her down, enjoying it. This wasn't a fight for survival. It was a conquest, and that, Kageyama realized, was what truly grated on him. He had seen countless hollows kill each other for territory, for power, to evolve. That was the law of this world. But this was different. This was subjugation for sport. It was the arrogance of the strong preying on the pride of another, not to consume, but to own. It was a violation of an unspoken code he hadn't even known he possessed. He watched as Grolg finally broke through Harribel's guard, his fist slamming into her stomach. The sound was a dull, sickening thud. She gasped, staggering back, and he grabbed her by the throat, lifting her off the ground. "See, this is the end," Grolg gloated, his face inches from hers. "You will learn to kneel." Her fracken screamed her name, trying to get to their feet. But they were too injured, too far. Harribel's hands clawed at his wrist, her Zanpakuto falling to the sand. Kageyama sighed. The sound was inaudible over the wind, but to him, it was a sound of resignation. Solitude was simple, interference was not. He had a choice: remain a shadow on the mountain, or descend. An echo of a memory, a flash of orange and a promise to a friend with pink hair, flickered in the back of his mind. A promise to never let her cry. It made no sense. It was just noise. But it was enough. He dropped from the dune. He didn't use Sonido. He just fell, a silent black shape against the lying moon. He landed without a sound 50 feet behind Grolg, his presence so utterly controlled that the brutish Arankar didn't even notice. Apache was the first to see him. Her eyes widened, her rage momentarily replaced by confusion. "Who?" Kageyama took a single step. The sand crunched under his foot. Grolg finally sensed him. He whirled around, still holding Harribel by the throat, his eyes narrowing. "Another one. Come to watch the new king ascend his throne." Kageyama didn't answer. He just looked at Grolg, his blue eyes flat and cold. Then he looked at Harribel, dangling limply in the Arankar's grip. He saw not a female to be rescued, but a warrior being humiliated. "Let her go," Kageyama said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the wind, clear and sharp, devoid of any accent or inflection. It was the sound of a blade being unsheathed. Grolg laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. "And who are you to give me orders? A stray dog. I am Grolg, the future ruler of this desert. This is my prize. Find your own." "You're wrong," Kageyama stated, as if discussing the weather. "You're not a king. You're just a bully. And you're not fighting to survive. You're fighting to own." He took another step. That's why you're going to die. The sheer, unadorned certainty in his voice gave even Grold pause. The bull Arankar's eyes narrowed to slits. Big words, little fox. He tossed Harribel aside. She landed in a heap, gasping for air, her fracken scrambling to her side. I'll kill you first, then I'll collect my queen. Grold bellowed and charged, his mass displacing the air, his ryutsu flaring like a dirty bonfire. Kageyama stood his ground. Grold was fast for his size, closing the distance in a blink. He threw a punch meant to liquefy Kageyama's entire upper body. Kageyama vanished. It wasn't the instantaneous flicker of Sonito. It was more fluid, like he had dissolved and reformed. He reappeared at Grold's side, his elbow driving upward into the joint of the larger Arankar's shoulder. There was a sickening crack of bone. Grold roared in pain and surprise, swinging his other arm wildly. Kageyama flowed under the attack, high-s movements a dance of impossible angles. He wasn't just fast, he was unpredictable. It was taijutsu fused with Sonito, a style born from a life he couldn't remember. From her position on the sand, Harribel watched, her eyes wide with disbelief. This newcomer, he wasn't just powerful. He was efficient. Every movement had a purpose. He wasn't fighting, he was dismantling. Stand still and let me crush you. Grold howled, frustrated, firing a crimson sarrow from his mouth. The blast tore a trench in the desert, sending plumes of sand into the air. When the dust settled, Kageyama was gone. Looking for me, Grold whirled around. Kageyama was standing right where he had been before, his arms crossed, his posture relaxed. He hadn't even been singed. The psychological toll was greater than any physical blow. Grold's rage turned to a sliver of fear. This wasn't a fight, it was a lesson, and he was the student. What are you? Grold stammered. Your mistake, Kageyama said, raising his right hand. The spiraling blue sphere of the Rasencerro ignited in his palm, its roar filling the sudden silence. A king doesn't need to announce himself. He didn't thrust it forward. He appeared directly in front of Grold, his speed so immense it seemed like teleportation. He slammed the Rasencerro into Grold's chest. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. The spiraling energy didn't explode. It ground, it chewed, it erased. Grold's eyes went wide in agony and shock as the vortex of blue light consumed him from the inside out. His bellow of pain was cut short as his entire torso was scoured from existence. His legs and head, disconnected, fell to the sand with a wet thud, dissolving into dust moments later. Silence. The only sound was the wind, whistling over the dunes. Harribel and her fracken stared, speechless. The monster that had been about to defeat them, to enslave them, was gone. Erased. And the one who had done it was now standing in the center of the basin, his back to them, his hand still faintly glowing. His ryutsu, it was immense, a deep and placid ocean compared to Grold's chaotic storm. But it was controlled, contained. He wasn't flaunting it, he just was. Kageyama lowered his hand and flexed his fingers, the last of the blue light vanishing. He looked at the spot where Grold had been, then turned his head, his blue eyes landing on Harribel. Her fracken instantly tensed, moving to shield her. Apache bared her fangs. State your purpose. What do you want from Lady Harribel? Kageyama's gaze was unreadable. He looked from the fiercely protective fracken to their injured leader. He saw the wariness in Harribel's eyes, the deep, ingrained distrust of a powerful male asserting dominance. He had seen it before. It was the way of this world. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Then he turned his back on them completely and began to walk away. Wait. The voice was Harribel's. It was strained, but it held its usual authority. Kageyama paused but didn't turn around. You saved us, she said, pulling herself to her feet, wincing as she clutched her bruised stomach. Why? He broke the rules, Kageyama said, his voice carrying on the wind. What rules? Mila Rose asked, confused. This is Hueco Mundo. There are no rules. There is one, he replied, his gaze fixed on the false moon. Fight to survive. Don't fight to own. He was a bully. I hate bullies. The simplicity of the statement was so at odds with the terrifying power he had just displayed that it left them speechless again. He hadn't saved them. He had passed judgment. Who are you? Harribel asked, her voice softer this time. He was silent for a long moment. Just a ghost, he finally said, and with a flicker of sonido, he was gone, leaving only the whisper of displaced sand and 4 very confused Arankar in the sudden, echoing silence of the desert. Harribel stared at the spot where he had vanished, her mind racing. Every powerful male hollow S he had ever encountered had been driven by a singular lust for power and domination. They saw her strength as a prize to be claimed, her body as a vessel to be used. This one, he had intervened, demonstrated power far beyond her own. And then simply walked away, demanding nothing. No fealty, no tribute, not even thanks. His reasoning was bizarre, almost childish, yet delivered with the conviction of a law of nature. I hate bullies. Lady Harribel, are you all right? Sun asked, her usual cynicism replaced by concern. I'm fine, Harribel said, though her ribs ached. She looked at Apache and Mila Rose. What do you make of him? He's strong. Frighteningly strong, Mila Rose said, her arms crossed. His Ryutsu is calm. It's unnerving. I don't trust him, Apache growled. No one is that strong for no reason. He'll be back. He'll want something. Perhaps, Harribel mused, her green eyes looking out into the endless night. Or perhaps he is something else entirely. She picked up her fallen Zanpakuto, its weight familiar and comforting in her hands. That brief, almost imperceptible shake of his head as he looked at them, it wasn't dismissal. It was understanding. He had seen her wariness and had chosen to remove himself as a source of it. That was more intriguing than any display of power. Let's go, she commanded. We find a place to rest and recover. But stay alert, I want to know more about this ghost. Kageyama moved through the night, putting distance between himself and the battle. The echoes of his past, the strange flashes of memory, were stronger tonight. A village, a swing set, the taste of ramen, faces he couldn't name. It was a constant, low-level hum beneath his consciousness, a life that was his and yet not. He had been reborn here, in this world of predators. But he hadn't been born of it. He found a secluded canyon, a deep scar in the desert floor, and settled on a high ledge. The act of intervention had left him unsettled. It was a violation of his solitary code, an invitation to complication. He had told himself he did it because of a principle, but the ghost of a memory, of a promise, suggested a different reason. A reason that felt dangerously like compassion. He pushed the thought away. Compassion was a liability. As he sat in the silent darkness, a new sensation pricked at his senses. It wasn't the jagged, hot energy of a hollow. It was a cold spot. A void. He focused, extending his spiritual sense downward, deep beneath the sands of the canyon floor. He found it. A fissure, not in the rock, but in reality itself. A.N.D. from it seeped an energy that was the antithesis of Ryutsu. It wasn't just cold, it was empty. It was the feeling of non-existence, of absolute entropy. A power that didn't want to consume or rule, but to simply unmake. It made the very air around it feel thin and wrong. The feeling was profoundly disturbing, a cosmic wrongness that his soul recoiled from. He had felt it in whispers before, fleetingly, but never this concentrated. He made a mental note of the location, sealing it away as a place to be avoided at all costs. This world had enough monsters. It didn't need whatever was sleeping down there. He was about to relocate when a different sound reached him. A small, pathetic sound. Crying. He scowled, the motion hidden by his mask. Crying was the dinner bell in Hueco Mundo. Whatever was making that noise would be devoured shortly. It was not his problem. But the sound was so helpless, so utterly devoid of malice. It was the sound of a lost child. It scraped at that same, deep heart of him that had made him intervene in Harribel's fight. With a growl of self-disgust, he dropped from the ledge, landing silently on the canyon floor. He followed the sound to a small alcove, hidden behind a petrified tree. There, huddled in a ball, was a small, childlike Arankar. She had short green hair, a comical-looking partial mask on her head, and a simple green dress. A jagged crack ran down the center of her mask. A sign of severe trauma. Tears streamed from her huge, expressive brown eyes. It was a child, a weak, helpless, nonsensical thing to exist in a place like this. His instincts screamed at him to leave. She was a liability, a drain, a distraction. Please, Pesci, Dondochaka. She hiccuped, her little body shaking. Where are you? He stood in the shadows, watching her. He should go. This was not his concern. He took a step back. The sand crunched. The child froze, her head snapping up. Her eyes went wide with terror as she saw his tall, dark figure. The fangs of his mask must have looked terrifying in the dim light. She let out a small squeak of fear and tried to press herself further into the rock. He stopped. He saw the pure, unadulterated fear in her eyes. And it didn't give him a thrill of power like it would most hollows. It just made him feel tired. He sighed, the sound a soft rush of air. He crouched down, a long way down, to bring himself closer to her level. The motion was slow, deliberate, non-threatening. He held up a hand, palm open, to show he held no weapon. I'm not going to hurt you, he said, his voice quiet. The child just trembled, watching him. Her tears still tracking paths through the dust on her cheeks. He felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Pity. He wasn't sure. He remembered the feeling of being an outcast, of being alone. It was a memory fragment. But a sharp one. He reached into a small pouch at his waist. Most hollows devoured souls whole, a messy and inefficient process. He had learned to purify and condense them, stripping away the lingering personality and fear, leaving only a core of pure spiritual energy. He had a few such cores, small, white spheres that pulsed with a gentle light. They were his rations for when he couldn't be bothered to hunt. He held one out to her in his open palm. It was a gesture of profound trust in this world, an offering of power. The child stared at the glowing sphere, then back at his masked face. Her fear battling with her hunger and confusion. She slowly, hesitantly, reached out a tiny hand. Her fingers brushed against his, and she flinched, but didn't pull away. She gently took the sphere. Thank you, she whispered, clutching it to her chest. He just gave a short nod, about to stand and leave. He had done his strange, uncharacteristic duty. The child looked at the sphere, then brought it to her mouth and took a small bite. The world exploded in green light. Kageyama was thrown back by a sudden, titanic release of Ryutsu. It wasn't violent or malevolent, but it was immense. A tidal wave of dormant power suddenly awakened. He landed on his feet, skidding back 20 meters, his eyes wide as he stared at the source. The small child was gone. In her place, enveloped in a pillar of emerald energy, was a woman. A tall, slender, and stunningly beautiful woman with long green hair, the same kind eyes, and a ram-horned mask fragment on her head. The number 3 was tattooed on her back. She was a former Espada. The light faded, leaving her standing there, blinking in confusion, as if waking from a long dream. She looked at her hands, her body, then at him. The terror was gone from her eyes, replaced by a dawning, shocking recognition. I'm me again, she whispered, her voice a rich, melodic alto. She looked at him, her gaze intense. Your energy, that core. It stabilized the damage to my spiritual core. It fixed me. Kageyama slowly stood up to his full height, his mind reeling. He hadn't just fed a lost child. He had restored a fallen warrior to her full power. This day was becoming increasingly complicated. You are Nelliel II Odelschwenk, he stated. He knew the name. A former Espada who had vanished. Rumors age she was killed by the ambitious Neutra Gilga. She smiled, a brilliant, genuine smile that seemed utterly out of place in Hueco Mundo. I am, and you are, Kageyama, he said, his voice flat. He was already calculating the consequences. A restored Espada level Arankar owed him a debt. That was a dangerous, messy connection. Kageyama, she repeated, tasting the name. Thank you. You showed me kindness when I was helpless. No one has done that in a very long time. She took a step toward him, her movements graceful. My power is yours to command. I owe you my life. He held up a hand. No, I don't want your power. I don't want your life, he said, his tone sharp. I don't collect strays. I gave you food because you were a crying child. That's all. Nelliel stopped, a look of surprise on her face. You truly want nothing. You have the power of a king, but you don't act like one. I am not a king, he said, turning to leave. This was too much. He needed to be alone. I have no kingdom. Then perhaps you should build one. The new voice, cool and measured, came from the canyon rim. Kageyama and Nelliel both looked up. Standing there, silhouetted against the false moon, were Harribel and her 3 Fracken. They must have tracked him, or been drawn by Nelliel's power surge. Harribel's gaze was sharp, analytical. She looked from the restored Nelliel to the stoic Kageyama. First you defeat Grolg and walk away. Now you restore a former Espada and refuse her fealty. You are a contradiction, Kageyama. I don't trust him. Apache snarled from beside her. This has to be a trick. Be silent, Apache, Harribel commanded, her eyes never leaving Kageyama. I am not speaking to you. She leapt from the rim, landing gracefully on the canyon floor. Her Fracken followed suit, fanning out, creating a tense perimeter. Now he was standing between 2 of the most powerful female Arankar in Hueco Mundo. One who owed him a life debt he didn't want, and one who was watching him with a dangerously sharp curiosity. His simple, solitary existence had shattered in the span of a single night. I have no interest in your affairs, Kageyama said, his voice low and threatening. Leave. No, Harribel said simply. Not until I understand. What is your goal? To be left alone. A goal no one with your level of power ever truly achieves, she countered. Power attracts power. It attracts predators. And it attracts scavengers. You can't remain a ghost forever. Grolg was just one. More will come. Nelliel stepped forward, placing herself at Kageyama's side. It was a clear declaration of allegiance. He is right, she said to Harribel. I know this world. I know the Espada. A new power is gathering. One built on despair and nihilism. I have felt its tremors. The one called Aizen. He will not tolerate rivals. To be alone is to be a target. Kageyama's jaw tightened beneath his mask. She was right. He knew she was right. That calm, controlled Ryutsu he had felt earlier. It was a sign of a new order, a far more dangerous one than the disorganized chaos that had reigned before. She speaks the truth, Harribel affirmed, nodding to Nelliel. My Fracken and I, we seek a place where we are not prey. Where our strength is our own. You fight for a principle, not for conquest. You protect without demanding submission. Nelliel here is a test. Amen to a kindness that shouldn't exist in this world. This is a foundation. A foundation for what? Kageyama asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Harribel's green eyes met his blue ones. A kingdom, she said, her voice dropping, filled with a conviction that mirrored his own. Not one of fear, like Baragan's was, or one of nihilism, like Aizen's will be. Something different, a place where the strong shield, rather than devour. You said you have no kingdom. I say you have 2 of its most powerful warriors standing before you, waiting for you to build it. The 3 of them stood in a triangle in the heart of the canyon, 3 Vasto Lord-class powers, their Ryutsu a complex tapestry of ambition, caution, and a strange, nascent hope. Kageyama looked from Harribel's fierce, challenging gaze to Nelliel's earnest, trusting one. He felt the phantom weight of a crown he never asked for. He had wanted solitude. Instead, the world had brought him allies. He had wanted peace. Instead, the world was promising him a war. And as he stood there, a decision hanging in the balance, all 3 of them felt it. A new Ryutsu. But this was no mere hollow. It was vast, oppressive, and sickeningly dominant. It washed over the entirety of Hueco Mundo like a foul tide, a declaration of absolute dominion. It was the feeling of a million souls screaming in forced unison. It was the Rhea, Su of a dark god descending and remaking the world in his image. From the east, a colossal structure of white stone began to rise from the desert, climbing impossibly high into the night sky, a palace of bone and despair. Las Noches. Aizen had arrived. The choice was no longer his to make. Solitude was a luxury that no longer existed. Kageyama looked at the 2 women before him. The wary queen and the compassionate knight. He felt the cold energy of the void seeping from the fissure below, and the tyrannical energy of the false god spreading from the horizon above. He was caught between 2 different kinds of oblivion. He finally gave a short, sharp nod. All right, he said, his voice a low growl that held the promise of a coming storm. Let's build a place to stand. The king without a kingdom had just found his cornerstones. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The echo of a fallen throne. The first brick of their kingdom was laid not with stone, but with a declaration. In the wake of Aizen's oppressive Ryutsu flooding the world, their tense alliance in the canyon had been forged into something solid by the anvil of necessity. They needed a bastion, a place to stand against the coming tide. They found it in a vast, sunken caldera, a massive crater left by some ancient, forgotten cataclysm. It was naturally defensible, with sheer cliffs of black obsidian rising on all sides, accessible only through a few narrow, winding canyons. Within its walls, a strange miracle of Hueco Mundo existed, a forest of the ubiquitous crystalline trees, but these pulsed with a faint, internal light, and a deep, underground reservoir fed a tranquil lake at the caldera's heart. The reishi here was dense, pure, and calm. They named it Oasis. Word traveled the way it always did in the desert, on the desperate whispers of the hunted. A ghost who fought not for conquest but for principle. A restored queen who embodied compassion. A stoic warrior who offered shelter. Hollows and Arankar began to arrive, not in a flood, but as a trickle of refugees. They were the disenfranchised, the powerful loners who refused to bow to Aizen's dogmatic nihilism, the weak who were tired of being fodder. Kageyama, Harribel, and Nelliel stood on a high overlook, watching the nascent community. Below, a hulking, four-armed Arankar was helping a much smaller one reinforce a dwelling carved into the cliffside. Near the lake, one of Harribel's Fracken, Mila Rose, was sparring with a newly arrived Arankar, testing his strength and teaching him a more disciplined fighting style. It was a scene of cautious, almost unbelievable, cooperation. "They look to you," Harribel said, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Kageyama. She wore her usual white jacket, but it was unzipped, revealing the top of her black hakama. Her mask fragment was in place. Her expression as unreadable as ever. "They see your power, the way you dispatched Grolg, and they see a shield. They see a bigger predator," Kageyama countered, his own fox jaw mask hiding his mouth. His blue eyes, however, scanned the scene with an unnerving intensity. "One that might keep the other wolves away." "Don't be so cynical," Nelliel said gently, stepping up beside him. She was a beacon of warmth in the perpetual twilight, her long green hair stirred by the canyon breeze. She had foregone her tattered child's dress for a simple, practical black and white outfit similar to his own. "They see hope. I talk to them. They're not just afraid of Aizen. They're tired of what this world makes them become. You offer them a chance to be something more." Kageyama fell silent. He didn't know how to respond to that. The concept was alien. He had only ever sought to survive, to quiet the ache of solitude. Now he was a symbol. It was a heavy, uncomfortable weight. His leadership style was unorthodox because it wasn't a style at all, it was instinct. He didn't issue commands from a throne. He walked the grounds of Oasis, his presence a constant, silent patrol. He broke up fights not with threats, but with a look that promised utter annihilation, a promise backed by the memory of Grolg's erasure. He reinforced defenses not by ordering others, but by carving new watch posts into the cliffs with precise blasts of his Rasencero. His actions were his decrees. Harribel was the strategist, the logistician. She organized the newcomers, assessed their strengths and weaknesses, and established a functional hierarchy. Her Fracken, Apache, Mila Rose, and Sun Sun acted as her lieutenants, their fierce loyalty to her now extending to the protection of Oasis itself. They were the architects of the new society. Nelliel was its heart. She moved among the disparate, distrustful Arankar with an open and genuine empathy that slowly eroded their predatory instincts. She mediated disputes, tended to the injured, and reminded them of the kindness Kageyama had shown her. She was the diplomat who turned a collection of refugees into a community. They were a triumvirate, a three-legged stool of power, strategy, and compassion. And their quiet rebellion did not go unnoticed. The warning came as a suffocating wave of Ryutsu, a pressure that felt ancient, brittle, and utterly absolute. It was the antithesis of Aizen's sharp, invasive power. This was a slow, creeping dread, the feeling of time itself grinding to a halt. The air grew heavy, the light from the crystalline trees seemed to dim. And a fine gray dust, like ash, began to drift down from the canyon rims. "Baragan," Harribel breathed, her voice tight, her hand instantly going to the hilt of her Zanpakuto. Kageyama's eyes narrowed. He looked up at the canyon entrance. Nelliel stood beside him, her expression hardening, the gentle compassion replaced by the focus of a seasoned warrior. The entire caldera fell silent. The 100 or so Arankar within freezing as they felt the presence of the one true, ancient king of Hueco Mundo. At the main entrance to Oasis, a figure appeared, silhouetted against the bleak sky. He was old, his body wizened, clad in regal white and black robes, a heavy golden crown resting on his skeletal head. He carried himself with the ponderous weight of ages. This was Baragan Luzenbairn, the Emperor of the Hollows, the god of death. And he was not pleased. He did not come alone. Flanking him were the 6 members of his Fracken, a diverse and monstrous assembly of Arankar. Each one a powerhouse in their own right. A massive, whale-like creature, a knight in full plate armor, a flamboyant man with a bird-like mask, and others, all radiating a predatory killing intent. Baragan raised a skeletal hand, and one of his followers, a lithe Arankar with a cat-like swiftness named Ggio Vega, leapt forward. He landed 50 feet from the first line of Oasis's defenders. A sneer on his face. "My king, Baragan Luzenbairn, is displeased," Ggio announced, his voice dripping with arrogance. "This little gathering, this, Oasis, it is an insult to the natural order. Strength devours the weak. The powerful rule. That is the law. This concept you peddle, this, protection, is a fallacy. A weakness." He pointed a clawed finger at the defenders. "Disperse now. Forsake this foolishness and return to the cycle of death. Do so, and my king may spare your worthless lives." No one moved. They were terrified, their Ryutsu trembling in the face of Baragan's overwhelming presence. But they held their ground. They looked back, toward the overlook where their 3 leaders stood. Kageyama watched, his expression unreadable. He could feel the fear from the Arankar below. He could also feel the fragile, stubborn spark of defiance. They had chosen this place. They were waiting to see if it was worth defending. "Apache," Harribel said, her voice a low command. Mila rose. Son, Lady Harribel," they replied in unison, appearing beside her. "Hold the line. Show them the strength of Oasis," she ordered. "But do not engage the king. He is ours." "Yes, my lady." They vanished in a flicker of sonido, reappearing at the front lines, their presence a much-needed surge of confidence for the defenders. Apache stepped forward, her chin held high, a feral grin on her face. "Go back to your dusty throne, old man," she taunted. "Your time is over. This is our land now." Baragan did not even deign to look at her. He simply gave a slight, dismissive wave of his hand. "Children playing at war," he rasped, his voice like grinding stones. "Teach them a lesson." His Fracken moved as one. It was not a chaotic charge, but a coordinated assault. The battle for Oasis had begun. Below, the canyon floor erupted into a maelstrom of Seros, clashing steel, and exploding spiritual energy. Harribel's Fracken were formidable, intercepting Baragan's own. Apache's wild, furious attacks met Ggio Vega's precise, lightning-fast strikes. Mila rose, with her raw power, engaged the massive, brutish nerd Parduok. Sun used her serpentine grace and sharp wit to harass and distract the others, her tripartite sleeves lashing out like vipers. But they were outnumbered and outmatched. Baragan's Fracken were seasoned killers, the court of a king. They fought with a synergy born of centuries of conquest. The defenders of Oasis, a hodgepodge of individuals, were beginning to buckle. "They're targeting the weak points in the formation," Harribel analyzed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "They're trying to break our morale before crushing our strength. A classic pincer movement. Then we break their pincers," Kageyama said. He made a cross-shaped seal with his fingers. Cage Bunshin no Rei. In a series of smokeless puffs, a dozen identical copies of him appeared on the ledge. They were not illusions. Each one possessed a fraction of his Ryutsu, a tangible, autonomous spiritual body. Nelliel's eyes widened. "I've never seen an ability like this." "Neither have they," Kageyama said, pointing. "You too, with me. The rest of you," he addressed his clones. "You know what to do." The 12 clones nodded in unison and leapt from the overlook, a wave of black and white descending into the fray. Their arrival was a cataclysmic shock to the enemy. Baragan's Fracken, who had been systematically dismantling the defense, suddenly found themselves besieged from all sides by a dozen fox-masked demons, each moving with the same impossible, fluid grace as the original. A clone appeared behind a bird-like Arankar, landing a devastating axe kick that sent him crashing to the ground. Another intercepted a Sero meant for a group of defenders, dissipating it with a smaller, controlled Rasengan in his palm. Two more worked in tandem, weaving around the giant Nerg, their attacks forcing the brute to focus on them, relieving the pressure on Mila Rose. The clones didn't speak. They didn't gloat. They just fought, a silent, coordinated force of nature that completely derailed the enemy's strategy. Harribel watched for a moment, a flicker of awe in her eyes. It wasn't just the power of the clones, it was the strategy. He wasn't using them as a blunt instrument. He was using them as a scalpel, reinforcing weak points, creating diversions, rescuing those in peril. He was seeing the entire battlefield at once. And in the midst of it all, she saw one of his clones appear at Apache's side, shielding her from a blow that would have incapacitated her. "Idiot, I didn't need your help." Apache snarled at the clone, though her stance wavered slightly. The clone just looked at her, then pointed. "Your left flank was open. Now it's not. Keep fighting." It then turned and engaged another enemy. Apache was stunned into silence. It wasn't a rescue. It was a tactical adjustment. He wasn't treating her like a damsel in distress, he was treating her like a soldier. A comrade. That simple, blunt assessment from a spiritual copy struck Harribel more deeply than any flowery compliment could have. It was a gesture of pure, unadult, orated respect for her Fracken's strength. While the clones turned the tide below, Kageyama, Harribel, and Nelliel moved. They didn't descend into the chaos. They used Sonido to appear directly before the one true target, Baragan Lusenbairn. The old king watched the battle below with bored detachment, his Fracken's sudden struggle barely registering as an annoyance. When the three leaders of Oasis appeared before him, he slowly turned his skeletal head, his hollow eye sockets fixing on them. The pressure of his Ryutsu intensified, a physical force that seemed to slow time around them. "The pretender, the traitor, and the mistake," Baragan rasped, identifying each of them in turn. "Kageyama, Nelliel, and Harribel. You have power, I will grant you that. But your philosophy is a disease. Life is a fleeting aberration. All things, joy, sorrow, ambition, hope, exist only to die. I am the embodiment of that absolute truth. Your Oasis is a blasphemous lie, a denial of the inevitable. I have come to correct it. The only thing inevitable here is your irrelevance, old man," Kageyama shot back, stepping forward. "An order based on nothing but decay is already dead. It just hasn't fallen over yet. Insolent child," Baragan hissed, a flicker of true anger in his voice. He slowly raised his arm. "You will learn the true meaning of an ending." From his body, a black, smoke-like miasma began to billow out. It wasn't an attack, it was an area of effect. The very air it touched seemed to age and decay. The crystalline ground cracked and turned to dust. The light in the trees flickered and died. It was his signature ability, Respira. The breath of death. "Don't let it touch you," Harribel yelled, leaping back. "Anything it touches rots away to nothing." Nelliel and Kageyama vanished, reappearing at a safer distance. The black fog spread slowly, inexorably, a creeping tide of annihilation. "There is no safe distance," Baragan's voice echoed from within the fog. "Time is my domain. All things that have a beginning have an end. I am that end." Kageyama watched the fog, his mind racing. This wasn't an enemy you could punch. It was a concept. How do you fight a concept? "Nelliel," he called out, "your Cerro Doble, can you absorb it?" "I don't think so," she yelled back, her face pale. "It's not energy. It's a state of being. There's nothing to absorb." "Harribel, can you contain it with your water?" "I can try." Harribel unleashed her Zanpakuto, Tiburon. A torrent of water erupted from her blade, forming a massive wall between them and the advancing Respira. The moment the black fog touched the water itself seemed to turn stagnant and gray, evaporating into a foul-smelling vapor. It slowed the fog, but it couldn't stop it. The water wall was being eaten away, molecule by molecule. "It's buying us time, but not much." Harribel grunted, pouring more and more Ryutsu into the attack. This was the strategic nightmare. A perfect defense. An unassailable offense. Kageyama realized why Baragan was king. Against this power, all other forms of strength were rendered meaningless. But Kageyama's mind didn't work like others. He wasn't looking for a way to overpower it, He was looking for a loophole. He created a single cage bunchen and sent it sprinting toward the fog. The moment the clone touched the edge of the Respira, its leg began to decay, crumbling into dust. The clone, without a flicker of expression, looked down at its disintegrating limb, then back at the original Kageyama, and gave a sharp nod before being completely consumed. The connection was instantaneous. Kageyama felt the clone's death, the sensation of rapid aging, the crumbling of his spiritual form. And in that final moment, he felt something else. A flicker, an anomaly. He turned his head, his gaze sweeping over the battlefield below. His clones were winning, but the Respira was still spreading. If it reached the main battle, everyone would die. He saw the fighting had shifted. One of Baragan's Fracken, a hulking beast, had been knocked back by Mila Rose, and one of the clones, sent crashing into the obsidian canyon wall. The impact had created a deep fissure in the rock. And from that fissure, Kageyama felt it again. That same, utterly cold, empty sensation he'd felt in the desert. The presence of the Void King's prison. Baragan's Respira, as it spread, neared the fissure. And Kageyama saw it. For a split second, the edge of the black fog wavered, thinned, and seemed to recoil from the emptiness seeping from the crack. He had it. The loophole. Bara. Jigen's power was the personification of an end. The end of time, the end of matter. But the energy from the fissure was not beginning. It was nothingness. It was a concept so alien that even the absolute power of death had no dominion over it. It was like trying to kill something that was never alive in the first place. He couldn't use it. The void energy was just as dangerous, if not more so, but the knowledge was a weapon in itself. It told him that Baragan's power, as absolute as it seemed, had a limit. It was not truly omnipotent. And if it had one limit, it might have others. New plan. Kageyama yelled, his voice cutting through the roar of Harribel's water wall. Nelliel, with me, we're the spear. Harribel, you're the cage. Don't stop the fog, redirect it. Funnel it, force him to concentrate it in one direction. Harribel's eyes widened in understanding. It was a terrifying gamble. If she failed, she'd be the first to be consumed. But she saw the fierce certainty in Kageyama's eyes. She trusted him. Understood. Nelliel nodded, her expression grim. What's the target? The king himself, Kageyama said. His power is absolute, but he isn't. If we can get to him, we can win. Harribel let out a ferocious yell. Changing her attack. Instead of a solid wall, she commanded the water into two massive, swirling currents, a liquid canyon that caught the edges of the Respira. The water sizzled and evaporated. But she poured more and more power into it, forcing the black fog into a narrower, faster-moving spearhead, aimed directly away from them. Baragan, from within his shroud, let out a sound that might have been a chuckle. A pointless gesture. You only hasten your own demise. The concentrated fog surged forward, now a directed weapon of annihilation. Now, Nelliel, Kageyama commanded. Nelliel took a deep breath, and her Ryutsu exploded. Lanzador Verde, she screamed, hurling her double-ended lance. The weapon spun through the air, a green drill of pure energy. But she didn't aim it at Baragan. She aimed it at the ground just in front of him. The lance struck, and the desert floor detonated in a massive explosion of green energy and white sand, creating a momentary, blinding screen. It was the opening Kageyama needed. He moved, a golden blur of Sonido. But he didn't charge through the screen. He charged around it, taking the long way, pushing his speed to its absolute limit. He was a phantom, a whisper of movement against the obsidian cliffs. Baragan, momentarily blinded, felt the lance's energy dissipate. A child's firework, he rasped. He felt Kageyama's Ryutsu, but it was distant. Circling. You cannot outrun time. I don't have to, a voice said, directly in front of him. Baragan's eyes widened. It was Kageyama, but how? He was still 50 meters away. Then he saw it. The Kageyama in front of him flickered, a clone. And behind him, another. And another. A dozen clones, which had disengaged from the main battle, had used the smokescreen to form a path. A chain of Sonido steps. The real Kageyama had used them like stepping stones, slingshotting himself across the battlefield at an impossible speed, arriving at his destination BEF. Or his own Ryutsu signature could catch up. The first clone lunged at Baragan. The king sneered and let the Respira touch it. The clone dissolved into dust. Then the next one lunged, and the next, each one buying a fraction of a second, forcing Baragan to focus his power on them. And in that final fraction of a second, as the last clone disintegrated, the real Kageyama was there. He wasn't holding a Rasencero to attack. His hands were glowing with the same blue, spiraling energy, but it wasn't a sphere. It was a web, a net of swirling light. "You can't touch the king," Baragan hissed, his own skeletal hand reaching for Kageyama. "I don't need to," Kageyama said, his blue eyes blazing. He slammed his hands together. The web of energy erupted, not into an explosion, but into a vortex. It was a cage of Rasencero, a spiraling prison of his unique, concentrated power. It enveloped Baragan completely. The Respira inside the vortex slammed against the spiraling walls. But the Rasencero wasn't a static barrier. It was a constantly regenerating, grinding force. The Respira ate at the energy, but Kageyama, channeling all his power, fed the vortex, the blue light spinning faster and faster. A miniature hurricane of destruction. It was a battle of attrition, the absolute end versus a force of endless rotation. For a moment, they were locked in equilibrium. The blue cage groaned, flickering, as the black fog of death ate at it from within. Baragan was trapped, but he was not beaten. "Your power is finite," the king's voice echoed from within the vortex. "Mine is absolute. This cage will break." "You're right," Kageyama grunted, the strain showing on his face, sweat beading on his brow. "It will. That's why this isn't the real attack." He looked past the vortex, his eyes meeting Nelliel's. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. Nelliel had been waiting. The moment the cage was formed, she had started gathering energy. A brilliant green light coalesced between the horns of her mask, a Cero of immense power. But she wasn't just charging her own energy. Using her Cero Doble ability, she began absorbing the stray Ryutsu from the battlefield, the wild energy from the fighting below. The ambient power of Oasis itself, adding it to her own. The Cero grew, becoming blindingly bright, unstable. "Now, Nelliel," Harribel shouted, seeing the vortex begin to crack. Nelliel let out a roar and fired. A colossal, emerald green Cero, twice its normal power, screamed across the canyon and slammed not into the cage, but into Kageyama's back. For anyone else, it would have been a fatal blow. But Kageyama had been ready for it. He didn't brace against it. He accepted it. He let the massive influx of energy surge through him, using his own body as a conduit. His Ryutsu flared, going from an ocean to a supernova. "Got you," he roared, pouring the combined power of himself and Nelliel into the Rasencero cage. The vortex, which had been flickering, exploded in size and intensity. The grinding sound became a deafening shriek as the blue energy, supercharged, began to actively shred the Respira, overwhelming it. From inside, Baragan let out his first and only true scream of pain and disbelief. His absolute power was being torn apart. Kageyama thrust his hands forward, collapsing the vortex inward. The spiraling cage of energy contracted, becoming a drill of unimaginable power. With the king of Hueco Mundo at its center, there was a final, blinding flash of blue-green light, and then, silence. The Respira vanished. The suffocating pressure was gone. The dust settled. Where Baragan Lusenbairn had stood, there was nothing. Only his golden crown, lying askew on the cracked and blackened ground. Kageyama stood over it, panting, his body steaming with residual energy. The fighting below had stopped. Everyone, Defender, Clone, and Baragan's Fracken, stared in stunned silence. Their king, the embodiment of death, the ruler for millennia, was gone. Kageyama's clones dissolved into wisps of energy. Returning to him, he swayed on his feet, the exertion of the final attack hitting him all at once. Nelliel was at his side in an instant, supporting him. Harribel appeared on his other side, her face a mask of exhaustion and sheer, unadulterated awe. The remaining members of Baragan's Fracken looked at the crown, then at the trio standing over it. Their leader, the knight-like one called Findor Callius, slowly, deliberately, knelt. He placed his fist on the ground and bowed his head. One by one, the others followed his lead. Ggio Vega, Apache's rival, hesitated for a moment. His pride warring with the undeniable truth before him, then he too knelt. They were not bowing in fear. They were bowing in the face of a power that had not just defeated their king, but had invalidated his entire philosophy. Death had been outmaneuvered. An ending had been unwritten. Kageyama looked at the kneeling warriors, then at the crown. He nudged it with his foot, the gold scraping against the stone. He felt no triumph, only a deep, profound weariness. He had just killed a god, and all it had earned him was a bigger throne and more responsibility. He pushed hymns, LF off Nelliel's and Harribel's shoulders, standing on his own. He walked past the crown, toward the edge of the battleground, and looked down at the assembled Arankar of Oasis. They were battered, bruised, but they were all looking up at him, their expressions a mixture of fear, reverence, and a fragile, burning hope. He had defended them. Their home was safe. Later that night, the lying moon one down on a victorious but somber oasis. The dead were gone, returned to the reishi of the desert. The wounded were being tended to by Nelliel, her gentle hands and calming presence more effective than any medicine. Baragan's former Fracken were being integrated, their loyalty transferred to the new power with a surprising lack of friction. They were warriors, they followed strength, and they had just witnessed the birth of a new apex. Kageyama sat on the edge of the overlook, alone, staring into the darkness. He felt Harribel's presence before he saw her. She came and stood beside him, followed a moment later by Nelliel. For a long time, none of them spoke. The silence was filled with the shared weight of the day's events. Apache came to me, Harribel said finally, her voice soft. She told me what your clone did. What he said. Kageyama didn't respond, his gaze distant. You treated her like a warrior, Harribel continued, turning to face him. Not like a subordinate to be managed or a woman to be protected. An equal. In all my years, no male with your kind of power has ever shown my family that kind of respect. She paused. Thank you. The words were simple, but they carry the weight of a lifetime of betrayal and distrust. It was a concession, an acceptance. Your strategy was brilliant, Nelliel added, her warm voice a counterpoint to Harribel's cool tone. The way we fought together, the three of us. It felt right, like we were meant to. Kageyama finally turned his head, his blue eyes meeting theirs in the pale moonlight. He saw Harribel's newfound respect, the last of her walls crumbling down. He saw Nelliel's unwavering belief in him, a belief he didn't feel he deserved. In this moment, exhausted and victorious, surrounded by the foundations of a kingdom he never wanted, he didn't feel the crushing loneliness that had defined his existence. He felt connected. I couldn't have done it alone, he said, and it was the truest thing he had ever spoken in this world. Without your control, Harribel, the Respira would have consumed us. Without your power, Nelliel, we couldn't have broken him. He looked out at the desert, at the distant, malevolent glow of Las Noches on the horizon. The fight was over, but the war had just begun. Baragan was the past, he said, his voice a low, determined rumble. Aizen is the future, and we are the present. The three of them stood there together, the ambitious loner, the wary protector, and the compassionate knight. Three kings, sharing one throne, under the single, silent moon. The foundation was no longer just a place. It was them. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Devil's Invitation. Victory was a heavier burden than defeat. In the weeks following Baragan's fall, Oasis transformed. The trickle of refugees became a steady stream. His defeat was a symbol, a story told in whispers across the white desert. The god of death was dead, and the ones who killed him were building something new. They came seeking protection, a chance to exist without constantly looking over their shoulder. Baragan's former Fracken, warriors of immense power and pride, integrated with a surprising ease. They had served a concept, the inevitability of death, and when that concept was proven fallible, their loyalty, a practical thing, transferred to the new, undeniable truth of Kageyama's power. Findor Callius, the stoic knight, now oversaw the training of Oasis's sentinels, his disciplined methods whipping the disparate collection of Arankar into a cohesive unit. Ggio Vega, the arrogant cheetah, found a Phi RCE rival and surprising equal in Apache, their constant, vicious sparring sessions becoming a strange sort of centerpiece in the Caldera's training grounds. Their animosity was a whetstone, sharpening them both. Kageyama watched it all, a silent, restless king. He paced the high ledges, a shadow against the false moon, his presence a constant reassurance to the hundreds of souls who had gambled their existence on him. He felt their collective gaze on his back, a weight of expectation that was far more crushing than any physical opponent. He hadn't asked for this. He had acted on instinct, on echoes of a forgotten morality, and had stumbled into founding a nation. Harribel was its architect. She moved with a quiet, ruthless efficiency, organizing supply lines for purified souls, establishing patrol schedules, and assessing every newcomer with a cool, discerning eye. Her 3 Fracken were extensions of her will, their devotion to her now encompassing the entire settlement. Oasis was becoming a fortress, not just of rock and power, but of order. Nelliel was its soul. Where Harribel built the walls, Nelliel built the home within them. She moved through the camps, her laughter a rare and precious melody in this desolate world. She listened to the stories of the refugees, comforted the fearful, and reminded the proud that their strength was now part of a greater whole. She was of that survival didn't have to mean sacrificing one's heart. One evening, the 3 of them stood on their usual overlook, watching the activity below. The caldera pulsed with a low thrum of contained energy. The collective ryutsu of nearly 1,000 Arankar, all living in a tense but stable peace. Our numbers have quadrupled since Baragan's defeat, Harribel stated, her tone analytical. We are reaching the limit of what this caldera can sustainably hold. We need to expand our hunting grounds, which will increase the risk of patrols clashing with Aizen's forces. Or they'll come to us first, Kageyama said, his gaze fixed on the eastern horizon, where the distant, towering edifice of Las Noches polluted the skyline. A power vacuum was one thing. A rival kingdom is another. He won't ignore us for much longer. As if summoned by his words, the feeling came. It wasn't the oppressive, world-spanning declaration Aizen had made before. This was different. It was subtle, insidious. 2 distinct pressures, needles of ice inserted into the warm blanket of Oasis's collective ryutsu. One was a profound and chilling emptiness, a spiritual black hole that seemed to drain the meaning from everything it touched. It was the feeling of despair given form. The other was sharp, thin, and unsettlingly cheerful, like the smile of a snake, a presence that felt like it was always behind you, a blade held inches from your neck. Every Arankar in Oasis froze. Training ceased. Conversations died. All heads turned toward the main canyon entrance. The ambient noise of the caldera vanished, replaced by a silence so profound it was a pressure in itself. 2 individuals, Nelliel whispered, her body tensed, the former Espada in her recognizing the signatures. But they feel stronger than any Espada I knew. Ulquiorra cipher, Harribel said, her voice a low growl. Aizen's eye, the aspect of nihilism. The other, I don't know him, but his energy feels wrong. Kageyama said nothing. He just watched the entrance. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He knew a challenge when he felt one. This wasn't an attack. It was a message. 2 figures appeared at the mouth of the canyon, walking with unhurried, deliberate steps. The first was a pale, slender Arankar with melancholic green eyes, black hair, and 2 teal lines running down his face like tears. His expression was one of absolute apathy. This was Ulquiorra. The second was a man with a constant, unnerving smile that never reached his eyes, his silver hair catching the moonlight. He wore the standard Arankar uniform, but carried himself with a lazy grace that hinted at incredible speed. This was Jin Ichimaru, a fox among wolves. They stopped just inside the entrance, faced by 100 armed and terrified defenders. Findor Callius and Apache stood at the fore, their hands on their Zanpakuto, but they made no move to attack. The sheer difference in spiritual pressure was a physical wall. My, Jin said, his voice a light, playful drawl that slid under the skin. Look at all the scared little faces. It's like a nest of stray cats. Are you the welcoming committee? Ulquiorra ignored the defenders entirely, his empty gaze lifting, scanning the caldera until it landed on the 3 figures standing on the overlook. He saw power. He saw order. He saw an anomaly that needed to be categorized or erased. Kageyama, Harribel, and Nelliel descended, not with a show of sonido, but by leaping from the ledge, landing silently on the canyon floor 50 feet from the envoys. Their arrival was a calming presence for their people, a triangulation of power that pushed back against the invasive ryutsu of the newcomers. You're a long way from your master's palace, Kageyama said, his voice flat and cold. He fangs of his mask gave his words a guttural edge. Ulquiorra's gaze shifted to him, impassive. You are the one they call Kageyama. The central pillar of this gathering. Lord Aizen has taken notice of your recent accomplishments. Did he send you to congratulate us? Nelliel asked, her tone sharp, her usual warmth replaced with the ice of a warrior who knew true evil. Jin's smile widened. Oh, something much better than that. He sent us with an invitation. He held up a hand, and a small, ornate black scroll appeared in it. Lord Aizen wishes for a summit. A meeting of kings. He proposes a neutral location. A place to discuss the future of Hueco Mundo. The proposition hung in the air, thick with unspoken threats. An invitation from a god was a command. Harribel stepped forward slightly, her hand resting on her sheathed tiburon. And if we refuse? Jin chuckled, a soft, breathy sound. Well now, that would be terribly rude, wouldn't it? And Lord Aizen does so dislike rudeness. He might feel compelled to tidy up. He gestured vaguely at Oasis, the casual threat of annihilation more chilling than any overt declaration. Kageyama looked from Jin's smiling mask to Ulquiorra's empty eyes. This wasn't a choice, it was a summons. To refuse was to show fear and invite war on Aizen's terms. To accept was to walk into a potential trap. But it was also a chance to meet the enemy, to take their measure. To make his own declaration. Where and when? Kageyama asked, his voice cutting through the tension. Ulquiorra gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The forest of Manos, where the pillars of sand meet the sky. At the next rise of the moon. He spoke as if reciting facts from a book. You may bring your 2 queens. Lord Aizen will be attended by us. A meeting of equals. The term, queens, was a deliberate probe, a test. Kageyama didn't react. We will be there, he said. Jin clapped his hands together lightly. Wonderful. We're also looking forward to it. Ulquiorra's gaze lingered on Kageyama for a moment longer, a flicker of something, curiosity. Analysis, in his empty eyes. Then, without another word, he and Jin turned and walked away, their unsettling Ryutsu receding with them. The moment they were gone, the collective breath of Oasis was released in a great, shuddering wave. The debate that followed was fierce, held in the private chamber they had carved. Behind the central waterfall, a grotto filled with the sound of rushing water and the light of glowing crystals. It's a trap, Apache insisted, slamming her fist on the stone table. Mila rose, and Sun had been brought into the war council. They'll ambush you. Aizen isn't a man who meets his rivals, he eradicates them. She's right, Mila Rose added, her arms crossed. It's a foolish risk. We should be fortifying our defenses, not walking into the lion's den. And what happens when the lion decides to leave its den? Harribel countered, her voice cutting through the noise. We cannot hide in this hole forever. Aizen's forces will eventually probe our defenses. We will have war. The only question is whether it begins on our terms or his. This meeting is an opportunity. A chance to gather intelligence. I agree with Lady Harribel, Findor said, his voice calm and measured. The former servant of Baragan was proving to be a surprisingly astute political mind. To refuse summit is to declare yourselves inferior. It is an admission of fear. You defeated a god king. You must now act the part. You must go. Nelliel, who had been silent, finally spoke. Kageyama, you've been quiet. What do you see? All eyes turned to him. He was leaning against the grotto wall, his fox jaw mask in his hands, a rare sight for the others. His face was stern, his blue eyes distant. I see a chessboard, he said slowly. Aizen is making a move. He's not trying to checkmate us, not yet. He's testing our response. He wants to see if I'm a king, a rook, or a pawn. If we hide, we're pawns. To be swept off the board at his leisure. If we go, we prove we're a major piece. We force him to acknowledge us. He looked at Harribel, then at Nelliel. We go. The 3 of us. We show him that Oasis is not 1 leader, but 3. We show him a united front. His decision, once made, was absolute. The argument ceased. There was a confidence in him, a clarity of purpose that swept away doubt. Then we prepare, Harribel said. Her expression grim but resolute. Apache, Mila Rose, Sun, you were in command of Oasis in our absence. Findor will advise you on defense. No one enters or leaves the caldera. If we are not back by the second moonrise, assume the worst and scatter. The survival of our people is paramount. Lady Harribel, we should be with you. Apache protested. No. Harribel's voice was firm. Your place is here, protecting our foundation. That is an order. Apache clenched her jaw but nodded, her loyalty overriding her fear for her master. The journey to the forest of Manos was a silent, tense affair. The landscape of Hueco Mundo grew stranger as they traveled, the white sand giving way to a forest of towering, pillar-like structures that were actually the legs of the colossal Manos Grande that slept beneath the desert floor. It was a desolate, unnatural place, a graveyard of giants. They moved as one, three blurs of black and white against the stark landscape. Harribel was a coiled spring of readiness, her senses sharp, her hand never straying from her blade. Nelliel was a beacon of calm focus, her gentle nature peeled back to reveal the former third Espada. A warrior of immense power and experience. Kageyama led them, his strides long and confident, his Ryutsu a placid ocean that betrayed none of the tension he felt. They found the designated clearing. It was a circle of flat, black sand surrounded by the towering legs of the Manos. In the center, waiting for them, were Aizen, Jin, and Ulquiorra. Sosuke Aizen was exactly as the rumors described. He looked deceptively gentle, with soft brown hair, kind eyes, and a pleasant smile. He wore a modified Arankar uniform, pure white, and he radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable confidence. The sheer pressure of his Ryutsu was suffocating, a gravity well that bent the world around him. But it wasn't the pressure that was most terrifying. It was the intelligence in his eyes, a cosmic intellect that saw them not as people, but as pieces in a game only he understood. Kageyama, Aizen said, his voice smooth and warm. Cheer Harribel, Nelliel tu Odelschwenk. I am so glad you could make it. Punctuality is a virtue of kings. We're not here for pleasantries, Aizen, Kageyama said, his voice muffled by his mask. The three of them stopped 30 feet away, forming a solid line. You wanted a meeting. Here we are. Aizen's smile didn't waver. Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. Let us dispense with the pretense. I have been observing your project. Oasis. It is a remarkable achievement. You have done what Baragan never could. You have inspired loyalty, not just commanded fear. So you've come to destroy it? Harribel asked, her voice dripping with ice. Destroy it. Aizen chuckled, a sound that was utterly devoid of humor. My dear Harribel, quite the opposite. I have come to elevate it. To give it purpose. He gestured to the vast, empty desert around them. This world is one of meaningless struggle. A cycle of devour and be devoured, leading nowhere. I intend to break that cycle. To ascend to the heavens and shatter the stagnant throne of the Soul King, creating a new world, a world without fear. Without a false god dictating our existence. A world of true meaning. By becoming a new false god yourself. Nelliel retorted, her eyes flashing with anger. Your Los Noches is a palace of despair. Your Arankar are broken souls you've twisted to your will. There is no hope in your world, only nihilism. Hope is an illusion for the weak, Ulquiorra stated from beside Aizen, his voice a monotone. A chemical reaction in the brain to delay the acceptance of despair. It is meaningless. Kageyama locked his gaze on Ulquiorra. You talk a lot about meaningless. Tell me, do you enjoy being your master's talking textbook? The jab was so direct, so dismissive, that even Aizen's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. Jin's eyes narrowed in amusement. Ulquiorra, however, was unfazed. Emotion is irrelevant. I state only facts, Ulquiorra said. Then here's a fact for you, Kageyama shot back. We're not interested. Aizen held up a hand, halting the escalating tension. Please, Kageyama, do not be so hasty. I am not asking you to be my subordinate. I am making you an offer worthy of your station. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I am expanding the Espada. I wish to create a new position. The Cerro Espada, the king of the Espada. An Espada with the authority to command the others, second only to myself. That position, Kageyama, is for you. The offer was staggering. It wasn't subjugation. It was a partnership. A crown, second only to the highest power in this world. Apache's fears of a simple trap seemed naive in the face of such a politically brilliant move. Aizen wasn't trying to destroy a rival, he was trying to absorb him. You would be the king of Hueco Mundo in truth, Aizen continued, his voice persuasive. Your oasis would be the heart of my new army. Your queens would retain their authority. You would lose nothing and gain everything. Together, we would remake the cosmos. Harribel and Nelliel looked at Kageyama. The offer was seductive. Power, security, a defined purpose. For a moment, the sheer scale of Aizen's ambition was almost intoxicating. Kageyama was silent for a long time. He looked at Aizen, at the godlike power radiating from him, at the promise of a seat at his right hand. Then he looked at Harribel, at her fierce, unwavering independence. He looked at Nelliel, at her compassionate heart that refused to be extinguished. He thought of the Arankar in Oasis, the ones who had come to him not for power, but for a reprieve from the very philosophy Aizen was espousing. A king of the Espada, Kageyama said finally. His voice low. A kingdom built on despair. A throne second to a tyrant. He shook his head slowly. Your offer is generous, Aizen. And it's worthless. Aizen's smile finally vanished. Explain. A throne built on fear is an empty chair, Kageyama said, his voice gaining strength. A kingdom where everyone is broken is just a well-decorated prison. You talk about a world without a false god. But all you're doing is putting on the old god's robes. Your Espada aren't loyal. They're terrified. They follow you because you're the biggest monster in the yard. The moment they see a weakness, they'll turn on you. He took a step forward, his own Ryutsu, the calm, deep ocean, pushing back against Aizen's crushing pressure. My kingdom is built on something else. On the idea that the strong have a duty to shield the weak. That a home is worth fighting for. It's built on trust. On a heart. Ulquiorra made a soft, dismissive sound. Heart. You used that word. I have. He ripped open the chests of men to find this heart you speak of. It does not exist. It is a concept invented by trash to give their pathetic lives meaning. That's because you're looking in the wrong place, Kageyama said, turning his piercing blue eyes on the pale Arankar. You think it's an organ. It's not. It's a connection. It's what I share with them. He gestured back toward Nelliel and Harribel. It's the reason they're standing with me right now, not behind me. It's the reason the Arankar in Oasis held their ground against Baragan's army even when they were terrified. It's the reason your kingdom is a lie. And mine is real. His words were a declaration of war, more potent than any blade. He wasn't just refusing Aizen's offer. He was invalidating his entire worldview. Aizen was perfectly still, his expression now cold and clinical. The mask of the gentle intellectual had fallen away, revealing the terrifying predator beneath. I see. You are not a pragmatist. You are a romantic. A dangerous, powerful romantic. It is a pity. Your power could have been a great asset. My power serves my people, Kageyama stated. Not your ambition. He turned his gaze back to Aizen. This is your only warning. The lands of Oasis are a sovereign nation. We are not your recruiting ground. We are not your enemy, unless you force us to be. Stay out of our territory. This is the only negotiation you will get. The audacity of it was breathtaking. A fledgling kingdom of 1,000 souls declaring its sovereignty to a god who commanded legions. Jin's smile had become a thin, sharp line. Ulquiorra's hand had moved to the hilt of his sword. The air crackled, threatening to shatter. But Aizen, after a long, tense moment, began to smile again. This time, it was different. It was a smile of genuine, intellectual curiosity. The smile of a scientist who has just discovered a fascinating, volatile new element. Very well, King of Oasis, Aizen said, the title dripping with condescending irony. You have drawn your line in the sand. I will respect it, for now. But do not mistake my curiosity for tolerance. The tide of my plan is rising, Kageyama. And it will wash away all castles built on sand. He turned to leave, but as he did, Ulquiorra paused. His head tilted slightly, his empty gaze drifting past Kageyama, past the pillar legs of the Manos, toward the distant location of Oasis. What is it, Ulquiorra? Aizen asked. Ulquiorra was silent for a moment, his unique senses probing something far beyond the current conflict. There is an anomaly, he said, his voice holdy. Ing the first trace of confusion Kageyama had ever heard from him. In the direction of your Oasis. I can feel the Ryutsu of your followers. I can feel the spiritual structure of the land. But beneath it, there is something else. He looked at Kageyama, his green eyes narrowed. It is a sea of nothingness. A void deeper than any I have ever perceived. It makes my own aspect of nihilism feel incomplete. What is that deep, utter emptiness you are nesting on? Kageyama's blood ran cold. Ulquiorra could feel it. The fissure. The prison of the Void King. Jin looked intrigued. Oh, a secret basement. How exciting. Kageyama kept his expression neutral, hidden behind his mask. Hueco Mundo is full of strange energies, Ulquiorra. Perhaps you're just sensing the ghosts of those we've killed. Ulquiorra's gaze was penetrating, analytical. He knew it was a lie. No, he said slowly. This is not the echo of death. This is the absence of existence. He filed the information away, his mind cataloging the puzzle. It is illogical. Aizen looked at Ulquiorra, then back at Kageyama, a flicker of new interest in his eyes. He didn't understand what Ulquiorra was sensing, but he understood that Kageyama was hiding something. Another piece on the board. Indeed, Aizen said smoothly. Another mystery for another day. He gave a final, chillingly pleasant nod. Until we meet again, King Kageyama. And with that, they were gone. Their Ryutsu vanishing as if it had never been there. The three rulers of Oasis stood alone in the silent, dead forest, the tension slowly bleeding out of the air. Sovereign nation, Harribel said, a note of dry amusement in her voice. You have the arrogance of a god yourself. To a man like that, Kageyama replied, finally letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Arrogance is the only language he understands as strength. We have made a powerful enemy, Nelliel said softly, her expression grim. He will not let this stand. I know, Kageyama said. But today we didn't lose. And we walked away on our own feet. He turned to them, his blue eyes intense. Let's go home. The return journey was as silent as the first, but the tension was different. It was not the anxiety of an unknown confrontation, but the heavy certainty of a coming war. They had survived the devil's invitation, but in doing so, had guaranteed his wrath. That night, after their return was celebrated with a quiet, fierce pride by the people of Oasis, the three of them gathered again at the heart of their kingdom, by the shore of the tranquil, moonlit lake. The pressure of the day had finally settled, leaving behind a stark clarity. He won't attack directly, not at first, Harribel said, sketching lines in the sand with the tip of her boot. He will test us, send probes, try to turn our people against us. Assassination attempts. He will try to dismantle us from within before he risks an open war. He'll use his espada, Nelliel added. He'll send them one by one. To gauge our strength. Neutra, if he knows I'm here, he will come. Aizen won't even have to order him. Her voice held a note of weary resignation. Kageyama listened, his gaze on the reflection of the cracked moon in the water. They were planning for war, for death and betrayal. And for what? For this patch of sand and rock. For the 1,000 souls who had placed their faith in them. We will be ready for them, he said. He looked at the two women who stood with him, the foundations of his impossible kingdom. Harribel, the fierce, pragmatic queen whose respect he had fought so hard to earn. Nelliel, the compassionate heart who had shown him that kindness was not a weakness. He had started this journey to escape an unbearable loneliness. He had built this place, by accident, to have somewhere to stand. But looking at them now, he realized it had become something more. They weren't just his allies. They weren't just his generals. He turned to face them fully. Aizen called you my queens, he said. His voice quiet. Harribel's visible eyebrow rose. A political label, a way to define our roles in his worldview. He was wrong about the politics, Kageyama said. But he might have been right about the word. He took a deep breath, the confession feeling more daunting than facing down Aizen. I didn't start this to be a king. I didn't know what I was doing. I just didn't want to be alone anymore. And I couldn't stand by and watch the strong crush the weak for sport. He looked at Harribel. I needed your mind, your strength, your ability to see the path when all I could see was the fight. He turned to Nelliel. I needed your heart, your compassion, your ability to remind me what we're fighting for. His voice was raw, honest, completely stripped of the commanding presence he usually wore. The confrontation today, standing there, facing him. I wasn't afraid, because you two were beside me. I've realized, This kingdom, this oasis, it's not the land. It's not the people, it's the three of us. Without you, it's just a rock in the desert. He looked from one to the other, his blue eyes burning with an emotion he couldn't name but felt in every fiber of his being. I can't imagine this place without you. I can't imagine my life without you. Not as lieutenants, not as allies. He took the final, terrifying step. A king needs a queen. But I need my partners. My family. He called you my queens. I'm asking if you will be. He wasn't asking for a political alliance. He was asking for them. Will you build this world with me? As one. The question hung in the cool night air, more momentous than Aizen's offer, more terrifying than Baragan's wrath. Nelliel's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. A wide, radiant smile broke across her face. You idiot, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I thought you'd never ask. Before he could react, she launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck in a fierce, joyful hug that nearly knocked him off his feet. Yes, of course, yes. Kageyama stumbled back, caught off guard by the sheer force of her happiness, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with Ryutsu. He looked over her shoulder at Harribel. The stoic queen was watching them, her arms crossed. The lower half of her face was hidden by her mask, but her green eyes were shining with an emotion she rarely allowed herself to show. There was no grand declaration from her. No tears or shouts. Instead, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her visible eye. She walked forward, stopping before them. She reached up and placed a hand on Kageyama's shoulder, a firm, grounding touch. A kingdom needs a foundation, she said, her voice a low, throaty murmur that was for him alone. The three of us, we are that foundation. She squeezed his shoulder gently. The answer is yes. It was a quiet acceptance, but it held the unshakable weight of a mountain. It was her trust, her loyalty, her future, all given in a single, simple word. Kageyama felt Nelliel's joyful embrace and Harribel's steadying hand, and for the first time since he had woken up in this world of endless night, he felt truly, completely home. He was Kageyama, the king of Oasis. And these were his queens. Together, they would face whatever hell Aizen decided to unleash. Let him come. Their throne was no longer empty. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Scars of Pride. The declaration in the grotto changed everything and nothing. Outwardly, the triumvirate still ruled as they always had, Kageyama the silent, indomitable shield, Harribel the sharp, strategic mind, and Nelliel the compassionate, unifying heart. But between the three of them, a new intimacy bloomed, a current of Ed warmth that ran beneath the surface of their every interaction. It was in the way Harribel's gaze would soften when she watched Kageyama train, the way Nelliel would bring him a purified spirit core without being asked. The way Kageyama would find himself standing a little closer to them during their nightly councils, drawing strength from their mere presence. Their bond, once a military alliance, then a political necessity, was now becoming a family. The peace, however, was a fragile thing, a thin sheet of ice over a boiling sea. They all felt Aizen's shadow looming, but the first crack in the ice didn't come from a calculated order. It came from a festering wound of pride and obsession. It began as a tremor, a discordant spike of Ryutsu on the eastern horizon. It was a jagged, furious energy, reeking of bloodlust and a desperate, gnawing insecurity. It was a signature Nelliel knew in her very bones. She was by the lake, showing a group of younger Arankar how to control their Sero by firing small, precise bursts at targets across the water. When she felt it, her hands froze, the gentle green light she was demonstrating flickering and dying. The laughter on her face vanished, replaced by a cold, hard mask. Neutra, she whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Kageyama felt it from the high cliffs where he was meditating. It was a brutish, unsubtle power, but it was immense. Easily on par with a high-ranking Espada. It was aimed directly at Oasis, a spear of pure malice. He was on his feet in an instant, his blue eyes narrowed, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Harribel was in the command grotto, reviewing patrol routes with Findor, when the pressure washed over them. She didn't flinch. She simply placed her palms flat on the stone map table, her knuckles white. He's here, she stated. Her voice devoid of emotion, but her eyes were flint. The one Nelliel warned us about. The warning klaxons, crystalline chimes amplified by resonating caves, began to sing their mournful, urgent song throughout the caldera. The Irankar of Oasis, now a disciplined fighting force, scrambled to their defensive positions. The calm of their sanctuary was shattered. Kageyama and Harribel appeared beside Nelliel in a flicker of sonido. She was staring at the canyon in trance, her body rigid, her expression a mixture of profound sadness and steely resolve. "This is my fight," she said, her voice tight. "His quarrel is with me. Your fight is our fight," Kageyama countered, his hand reflexively going to the hilt of his unseen Zanpakuto. "We face him together." "No," Nelliel said, turning to him, her brown eyes pleading. "You don't understand him, Kageyama. He's not like Baragan, who fought for a philosophy. He's not like Aizen, who fights for ambition. Oitra fights because he needs to feel strong, and he feels strongest when he's preying on those he perceives as weak. Especially me." She took a shaky breath. "He can't stand that I pitied him. That I was stronger and refused to kill him. His entire existence is a reaction to that moment. If you fight him, he'll see it as me hiding behind you. It will only feed his obsession. I have to be the one to face him. I have to end this. On my own terms." Harribel looked from Nelliel's desperate face to the approaching Ryutsu. She understood. This wasn't a strategic battle, it was an exorcism. "She's right," Harribel said to Kageyama, her voice low. "This is a matter of pride. For both of them, we cannot interfere in the duel itself." Her gaze hardened. "But we can make sure it is a duel." Kageyama's jaw tightened beneath his mask. Every protective instinct in him screamed at him to stand in front of Nelliel, to erase this new threat as he had growled. But he looked into her eyes and saw not fear, but a desperate need for closure. To deny her this would be to wound her more deeply than any blade. He remembered his own battles, the ones that were personal, the ones he had to win himself. He understood. "All right," he said, the word tasting like defeat. "You face him. Harribel and I will handle his entourage." He placed a hand on Nelliel's shoulder, his touch firm. "But you are not alone. We will be your corner. We will be the wall at your back. Do you understand?" Nelliel looked at him, tears welling in her eyes, and nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over her. "I understand." At the canyon entrance, two figures appeared. The first was terrifyingly familiar to Nelliel. Neutra Gilga, the fifth Espada. He was unnaturally tall and painfully thin, with a predatory, praying mantis-like build. A massive, spoon-shaped eyepatch covered his left eye, and his long black hair framed a face locked in a perpetual, sadistic grin. The number, 5 feet, was tattooed on his tongue, which he delighted in showing off. Slung over his shoulder was his Zanpakuto, a ridiculously oversized weapon resembling 2 crescent moons fused back to back on a pole. Beside him stood his Fracken, a loyal, stone-faced giant of a man named Tessra Lindacruz, who carried a circular, cog-like Zanpakuto on his back. Well, Neutra's voice echoed through the now silent canyon, a high, grating sound that scraped on the nerves. "Look what the cat dragged in. The traitor, Nelliel to Odelschwenk. I heard rumors you'd gotten your memory back. I just had to come see for myself." He sauntered forward, his Z sweeping over the assembled defenders of Oasis with contempt. "What's all this then, Nell? Playing house, leading a bunch of worthless trash who are too scared to fight on their own. How pathetic. You always were a soft, bleeding-hearted disgrace." Nelliel stepped forward, her 2 queens flanking her, then moving aside to give her a clear path. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Neutra, Aizen gave you permission for this little field trip." Neutra's grin widened. "Aizen-sama is curious about the strength of this place. He gave me leave to test it. Said I could do whatever I wanted, as long as I brought back a full report." His lone eye gleamed with manic glee. "He didn't have to ask me twice. I've been dreaming of this day, Nell. The day I get to put you in the dirt for good." "Your obsession is as boring as it is predictable," Harribel said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You are nothing but a rabid dog, Gilga. Shut your mouth, you bitch." Neutra snapped, his gaze shifting to her. "This has nothing to do with you. This is between me and her." He pointed a long, bony finger at Nelliel. "The ultimate battle, to see who is truly the strongest. We already had that battle, Neutra. Years ago, Nelliel said, her voice soft but firm. I won. And I spared you. You pitied me, he roared, his ryutsu flaring violently. You stood over me, you lectured me about being a beast, and you walked away. You treated me like I was garbage. That's not a victory. That's a humiliation. I'll show you what a real warrior is. A real warrior kills their enemies. They bathe in their blood. He unslung his massive weapon and pointed it at her. Today, you die, and I'll finally be free of your ghost. Kageyama stepped forward, placing himself between Neutra and the others. She will face you, he said, his voice a low rumble. One-on-one. But your lapdog, he nodded toward Tessera, and any other tricks you have planned, will have to go through us. Tessera, who had been silent, stepped up beside his master, his hand on his Zanpakuto. I will not allow anyone to interfere with Lord Neutra's battle. Then you're going to be busy, Harribel said, drawing her tiburon. The broad, hollow blade glinted in the moonlight. Neutra laughed, a high, unhinged sound. Fine, keep the trash busy. Tessera, you can play with the shark-faced bitch. The blonde one, he looks strong. I'll leave a little surprise for him. He slammed the butt of his weapon on the ground. Come on out. From the shadows behind him, a dozen more figures emerged. They were not Urankar, but powerful. Brutish Ijuka's class hollows, their masks twisted into expressions of mindless hunger. Aizen had given him more than just permission, he had given him a private army. Kageyama, Harribel said, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the new threat. You take the beasts, I will take the Fracken. Give Nelliel the space she needs. Understood, he said, his gaze locked on the Ijukas. He cracked his knuckles, a sharp, echoing sound in the tense silence. Nell, Neutra screamed, his voice filled with joyous rage. Let's dance. He charged, his movements surprisingly fast for his lanky frame. His weapon held high. Nelliel met his charge, drawing her own slender, elegant Zanpakuto. Their blades met with a deafening clang that sent shockwaves through the canyon. The duel had begun. Simultaneously, the rest of the battlefield exploded into motion. Harribel and Tessera vanished in a blur of sonido, their battle a whirlwind of steel and flashing energy that moved across the canyon floor. Kageyama faced the pack of Ijukas. They were strong, but they were mindless, driven by instinct. To him, they were nothing. He didn't even draw a weapon. He moved into them, a black, clad wraith in a storm of claws and fangs. His movements were a blur of fluid economy. An Ijuka's resembling a giant boar lunged at him. He sidestepped, his hand chopping down on the back of its neck, the blow delivered with such precise, condensed force that it snapped the creature's spiritual spine. It collapsed without a sound. Another, a spider-like creature, spat a web of corrosive acid. He created a single cage buncheon, which took the hit, dissolving into smoke, while the real Kageyama appeared above the creature, his heel driving its masked face into the ground with enough force to shatter the rock beneath. He moved through them like a phantom, each strike a killing blow, a masterclass in hand-to-hand combat. He was a force of nature, a silent, efficient engine of destruction, his power demonstrated in its effortless application. He was containing the threat, keeping them far from Nelliel's duel, a living wall of absolute competence. Meanwhile, Harribel's fight with Tessera was a clash of philosophies. Tessera was a fortress, his fighting style based on overwhelming power and an unbreakable defense. He swung his massive, cog-like blade in wide, devastating arcs. Harribel was water, flowing around his attacks, her movements graceful and deadly. She couldn't break his guard with force, so she sought to dismantle it with precision. You fight with honor, she said, parrying a blow that would have shattered a crystalline tree. Why do you serve a man like Neutra? Lord Neutra gave me purpose, Tessera replied, his voice a deep monotone, his face grim. He is my king. I will defend him to the last. He is a broken child throwing a tantrum, Harribel countered, firing a concentrated jet of water from her blade. Lagoda, that forced him back. He will lead you to ruin. It is not my place to question him, Tessera said, resuming his assault. Only to serve. Their battle was a stalemate, the immovable object against the unstoppable force. But Harribel's goal wasn't to defeat Tessera quickly. It was to keep him occupied. She was the cage for Neutra's dog. The true storm was the battle between Nelliel and Neutra. It was a vicious, hateful affair. Neutra fought with a wild, unpredictable ferocity. His massive Zanpakuto a whirlwind of destruction. He was all offense, each swing meant to maim and kill, his laughter echoing with every blow. Nelliel was his opposite. She fought on the defensive. Her movements filled with a sad grace. She was faster, more skilled. Her parries were perfect, her footwork flawless. She could have ended the fight a dozen times, but she held back, her expression pained. "What's wrong, Nell?" Neutra taunted, their blades locked. "Don't want to hurt me. Still think you're better than me. That's what I hate about you. That pity in your eyes. Fight me like you mean it." He shoved her back and swung his weapon in a massive horizontal arc. "Pray, Santa Teresa," he screamed, unleashing his resurrection. His body twisted and grew, his Ryutsu exploding. He gained 4 more arms, each one holding a massive scythe-like weapon. A crescent-shaped horn grew from his forehead. He was a monstrous insect of death, his sadistic grin stretching impossibly wide. "Now, Nell, now the real fight begins," he cackled, attacking with a 6-bladed flurry that was impossible to block. Nelliel was forced back, her lithe form dodging and weaving. The scythes missing her by inches, carving deep gouges in the canyon walls. The sheer pressure was immense. "Why won't you release your Zanpakuto?" Neutra shrieked. "Are you looking down on me? I'll make you take me seriously." From across the battlefield, Kageyama dispatched the last of the Ajukas, crushing its head under his heel. He turned just in time to see Nelliel take a hit. One of Neutra's scythes caught her along the ribs, slicing through her clothes and drawing a line of crimson. She gasped, staggering back, clutching her side. Kageyama saw red. A guttural roar of pure, undiluted rage tore from his throat, a sound so primal and furious that everyone, Harribel, Tessera, and even Neutra, froze for a second. His Ryutsu, usually a calm ocean, erupted into a violent, golden tsunami. "Nell," he bellowed. He was about to launch himself across the canyon, to tear Neutra limb from limb, when he felt a hand on his arm. It was Harribel. She had used the distraction to disengage from Tessera. "Wait," she said, her voice firm, her green eyes locked on his furious blue ones. "This is her decision. Look at her." Kageyama forced himself to look. Nelliel was on one knee, breathing heavily. Blood dripping from her wound onto the white sand. Neutra stood over her, laughing triumphantly. But Nelliel's expression, it wasn't one of defeat. The sadness was gone. The pity was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard fury that mirrored Kageyama's own. She slowly got to her feet, her eyes glowing with a faint green light. "You're right, Neutra," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "I have been holding back. I didn't want to become the beast you are. But you've left me no choice." She raised her blade, pointing it at him. "Declare, Gamuza." A whirlwind of emerald energy enveloped her. Her Zanpakuto transformed into a double-ended lance, and her body was clad in a green, centaur-like armor. She had become a majestic, powerful creature, a knight of verdant destruction. Her Ryutsu skyrocketed, eclipsing Neutra's own. This was the true power of the former third Espada. "Yes, yes," Neutra screamed in ecstasy. "That's it. That's the look I wanted to see. The look of a killer." "You were mistaken," Nelliel said, her voice echoing with power. "This is not the look of a killer. This is the look of a protector who has been pushed too far." She charged. Her speed was now unbelievable, a green comet of righteous fury. Neutra met her charge, his 6 scythes a wall of steel. But this time, there was no contest. Nelliel's lance struck his weapons. There was a screech of tortured metal, and then, one by one, his scythes were shattered, broken into pieces by the sheer force of her assault. She moved in a blur, her lance a torrent of strikes that Neutra couldn't hope to track. She wasn't just overpowering him, she was dismantling him, piece by piece. She disarmed him, shattered his hierro, and broke his stance. In a final, decisive move, she spun. The butt of her lance slamming into his chest, the impact cracking his ribs and sending him flying backward. He crashed into the far canyon wall with enough force to create a spiderweb of cracks. He slid to the ground, his resurrection broken, his body battered and bleeding. He was defeated, utterly. Nelliel stood over him, her lance pointed at his throat. He looked up at her, not with fear, but with a wild, Desperate grin. Do it, he rasped, coughing up blood. Kill me. Finish it. Prove you're a real warrior. Nelliel looked down at him, at the pathetic, broken man who had haunted her for years. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the need for an ending. And in that moment, she made a choice. She lowered her lance. Her resurrection faded, returning her to her normal form. The green armor dissolved, leaving her standing there in her tattered clothes, her wounds still bleeding. No, she said, her voice soft again, but this time it wasn't pity. It was strength. Killing you won't prove anything. It would just mean I've stooped to your level. My victory isn't in your death, Neutra. It's in the fact that I can defeat you so completely and still choose not to kill you. She turned her back on him. Your obsession is your own prison. You can stay in it if you like. I'm done with it. Neutra's grin faded, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending horror. This was worse than death. It was dismissal. It was irrelevance. He hadn't been defeated by a warrior. He had been dismissed by a queen. No, he screamed, a pathetic, broken sound. Tessera, seeing his master defeated, let out a roar of despair and charged, not at Nelliel, but at Kageyama, seeing him as the cause of all this. Kageyama didn't even turn. He just raised a hand, and a small, spiraling SPH. Air of golden energy, a positive energy Rasengan, met Tessera's charge. It didn't explode, it just pressed against his chest, and the giant Arankar froze, his eyes wide, before collapsing, unconscious but unharmed. The battle was over. Nelliel swayed on her feet, the adrenaline leaving her. Kageyama was at her side in an instant, his arms wrapping around her, supporting her. He pulled her close, his hand gently touching her bleeding side. You were incredible, he whispered into her hair. I'm so tired, she murmured, leaning her full weight against him. Harribel walked over, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. She looked at Nelliel's wound, then at the defeated Neutra, and finally at the way Kageyama was holding Nelliel, his entire posture a bastion of fierce protection. Let's get you home, Harribel said softly. They left Neutra and the unconscious Tessera where they lay. Their fates were Aizen's problem now. Later that night, in the private grotto behind the waterfall, Kageyama gently tended to Nelliel's wound. He had learned some basic healing arts, a strange echo of his past life, using his golden ryutsu to cauterize the cut and knit the flesh back together. Harribel sat nearby, watching them. The steady sound of the waterfall a calming presence. The battle had left Nelliel emotionally raw. The confrontation she had dreaded for years was over, and the resolution had been draining. She leaned against Kageyama, her head resting on his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I thought I would have to kill him, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I thought that was the only way to end it. But when I looked at him, I just saw a pathetic, lonely creature. Like so many others in this world. You showed him true strength, Harribel said, her voice resonating with deep respect. Not the strength to kill, but the strength to rise above the need to. You proved your philosophy is superior. That is a greater victory than any death. Kageyama finished his work, his hand lingering on her side. He looked at Nelliel, her face pale but peaceful in the crystal light. He looked at Harribel, her sharp edges softened by a profound empathy. In this quiet, secluded space, the weight of their crowns, of the coming war, seemed to fall away, leaving only the three of them. Their bond had been forged in battle, solidified by a political declaration. But here, in the vulnerable aftermath of a deeply personal conflict, it was about to be sealed. Kageyama gently turned Nelliel's face toward him. You were never alone in that fight, he said, his blue eyes holding hers. Not for a second. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of profound comfort, of reassurance, a promise that he would always be her shield. When he pulled back, he turned his gaze to Harribel. She watched him, her expression unreadable but her eyes full of a deep, ancient knowing. He didn't move toward her. He just held out a hand. An invitation. She hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then she rose and came to them, taking his hand. She knelt beside Nelliel, her presence a cool, steady counterpoint to Nelliel's warm vulnerability. The three of them were a circle, complete. Kageyama looked from Harribel's fierce, loyal eyes to Nelliel's deep, compassionate ones. I meant what I said, he murmured, his voice for them alone. At the lake. I can't do this without you. There was no ceremony. There were no rings, no witnesses, no pomp or circumstance. There was only the sound of the waterfall, the glow of the crystals, and the quiet, unshakable truth of their connection. Under the lying moon of Hueco Mundo, in the heart of the kingdom they had built together, they exchanged their silent vows. Not with words, but with a shared look, a joining of hands. A leaning into one another. It was an acceptance, a promise, a union. The king, and his two queens. A family forged in the fires of a hollow world, their bond now their strongest weapon and their only true home. As they sat there, a silent, unshakable trinity, Kageyama felt the faintest tremor from deep beneath the ground. A cold, empty vibration that seemed to momentarily dim the light of the grotto. The fight with Neutra, the sheer spiritual pressure released by two Espada-level resurrections, it had disturbed something. The fissure, the prison of the Void King, had been weakened. A hairline crack appeared in the far wall of the grotto, and from it seeped not energy, but a chilling absence. A small, misshapen hollow, more a mockery of life than a creature, crawled out. It had no mask, no features. Just a shifting, vaguely humanoid shape of pure blackness. It didn't radiate Ryutsu. It radiated nothing. Kageyama, Nelliel, and Harribel were on their feet in an instant. Their intimate moment shattered. The creature turned its featureless head toward them, and a wave of psychic despair, of utter meaninglessness, washed over them. It was a feeling that went beyond fear. A corrosion of the soul itself. Kageyama reacted on pure instinct. He didn't use a Rasencero. That was for destroying things that existed. This was different. He held out his hand, and a sphere of pure, golden, sun-like energy formed in his palm, the positive, life-giving aspect of his power. He didn't throw it, he blasted it, a solar flare of raw creation. The golden light hit the creature of nothingness. There was no explosion, just a silent, violent cancellation. Light and shadow annihilated each other. For a terrifying second, the void creature seemed to absorb the light, but Kageyama poured more and more power into the blast, a torrent of pure existence. The creature dissolved, unraveling like smoke in a hurricane, leaving no trace it had ever been there. The three of them stood in the sudden silence, staring at the spot. The warmth of their union was gone, replaced by a chilling dread. What in all the worlds was that? Harribel breathed, her voice shaky for the first time. Kageyama looked at the hairline crack in the wall, now sealed by his own solidified energy. He knew what it was. It was a leak, a warning. Their war wasn't just with Aizen. A far older, far more terrible enemy was stirring in the deep dark. And their battles were ringing the dinner bell. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. War on Two Fronts. The victory over Neutra and the private, profound union that followed should have brought a measure of peace to Oasis. Instead, it was the ominous calm in the eye of a hurricane. The appearance of the void creature had left a lingering chill, a cosmic dread that even the warmth of their new bond couldn't entirely dispel. Kageyama had sealed the fissure in the grotto, but they all knew it was a temporary fix, a patch on a dam that was beginning to crack under immense, unseen pressure. Aizen did not make them wait long. Neutra's failure was not just a military loss, it was an ideological one. Nelliel had defeated him not by being more brutal, but by being stronger in her conviction. This was a direct refutation of the nihilistic creed Aizen preached. Such heresy could not go unanswered. The devil's curiosity had soured into outright hostility. The attack came without warning. It was not a single champion seeking a duel, but a full-scale punitive expedition. 3 distinct, powerful Ryutsu signatures tore through the outer perimeter of Oasis's territory, moving with blistering speed toward the caldera. The klaxons screamed. This time, there was no fear, no hesitation. The Urankar of Oasis, veterans of Baragan's assault and inspired by Nelliel's victory, moved to their posts with a grim, determined efficiency. This was their home. They would not let it fall. Kageyama, Harribel, and Nelliel stood on the main overlook, the wind whipping at their clothes. Their expressions hard as granite. Below them, their army assembled. 3 Espada-level signatures, Harribel analyzed, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. One is brutish and chaotic. Grimjow Jagerjaquez. The Sexta Espada. The one next to him, Nelliel added, her voice tight, is Zamari Ruro, the Septima. The master of Sonido, fast, and his ability is problematic. And the third, Kageyama asked, his gaze fixed on the most distant, but strangest, of the signatures. It felt disciplined, rigid, completely different from the wild energy of a hollow. It felt orderly. As he spoke, the answer appeared, tearing through the sky from the opposite direction. From above, not from across the desert, was a completely different force. A Garganta, a black portal of spiritual transit, ripped open the perpetual twilight of Hueco Mundo. From it, dozens of black-robed figures emerged, their white Haori coats marking them as captains and lieutenants of the Gote 13. Soul Society had arrived. Damn it all, Harribel swore, a rare display of frustration. They're here. The Shinigami. The newcomers were a reconnaissance in force, a heavily armed investigative unit. They had been monitoring the massive, stable Ryutsu signature of Oasis for weeks, a power block that was clearly not under Aizen's control. In their eyes, an organized Arankar society was a threat, regardless of its leadership. They were here to assess and, if necessary, neutralize that threat. At their head was a man Kageyama had never seen, but whose presence radiated a powerful, stoic authority. He was tall, with short, dark hair, and a stern, handsome face marked by a single, thin scar over his right eye. He wore the captain's Haori of Squad 5, and his Ryutsu was a deep, calm well of immense spiritual power. Honed by centuries of discipline. This was Captain Kenshin Amagiri, one of Soul Society's most respected and formidable warriors. Oasis was caught in a pincer. Aizen's forces from the east, Soul Society's from the west. 2 fronts, 2 enemies, 1 home to defend. Aizen's timing is perfect, Nelliel said grimly. Or he's working with them. No, Kageyama said, his eyes narrowed. Look at them. The Shinigami are as surprised to see Aizen's men as we are. This isn't a coordinated attack. This is a disaster of circumstance. We're caught in the middle. It doesn't matter, Harribel declared. Drawing Tiburon. The objective is the same. Defend Oasis. She turned to their assembled forces. Findor, Ggio Vega, and her own Fracken stood at the fore, their expressions grim but ready. Findor, Ggio, you command the main force. Your objective is to hold the line against the Shinigami foot soldiers. Do not engage their captains. This is a battle of containment, not annihilation. Understood, Findor replied, his calm a steadying presence. Apache, Mila rose, Sun. Harribel barked. You're with me. We're taking the Panther. Grimjow is ours. Nelliel stepped forward, her green eyes blazing. Zamari's speed is his greatest weapon. I can match it. He's mine. That left the 2 main threats. On one side, Grimjow Jagerjackez, the feral embodiment of destruction. On the other, Kenshin Amagiri, a Shinigami captain of unknown but clearly immense power. And Kageyama, standing between them. I'll take the captain, Kageyama said, his decision instantaneous. The Shinigami were the greater long-term threat. Aizen's forces were a blunt instrument, but Soul Society represented a systemic enemy, an entire world order that saw them as abominations to be purified. He needed to understand this new enemy. He needed to take their measure. The battlefield erupted. It was not one battle, but 3 distinct, chaotic conflicts happening simultaneously. On the southern front, Harribel and her Fracken met Grimjow. The Sexta Espada was a whirlwind of manic energy, his blue hair wild, his eyes alight with the pure joy of battle. He didn't come with an army, he was an army. So you're the ones who took down the old bone bag Baragan. Grimjow yelled, a savage grin on his face. And you oft Neutra. Good. Means you're worth killing. I'm gonna be the king of this wasteland. And that means I gotta crush anyone with a crown. Pantera. He released his Zanpakuto, transforming into a sleek, panther-like form, his speed and power amplifying tenfold. He moved like a bolt of lightning. A blue-white blur of claws and fury. Harribel met his charge head-on. You are no king, she said, her voice cold as the grave. You are just a beast, and I will put you on a leash. Their battle was a clash of predators. Grimjow was all instinct, a storm of wild, powerful attacks. Harribel was a patient hunter, her movements fluid and deadly, weathering his storm will. Looking for the perfect moment to strike. Her Fracken moved around them, a perfectly coordinated unit. Apache's wild lunges created openings. Mila Rose's powerful Saros forced Grimjow to dodge. Su En-sun's acidic projectiles and sharp-witted taunts kept him off balance. It was four hunters working together to take down a larger, more powerful beast. The battle was a maelstrom of water, claws, and Saros. A testament to the strength of Harribel's family. On the northern front, Nelliel faced Zamari Ruro. The seventh Espada was a strange, meditative figure, but his speed was legendary. He created up to 5 clones of himself using his unique Sonido, Gemello's Sonido, surrounding Nelliel in an instant. Your existence is an affront to Lord Aizen, Zamari's voice echoed from all directions. Quote, I shall bring you salvation by ending your life. The only one who needs saving here is you, Zamari, Nelliel replied, her own Ryutsu flaring. You've traded your soul for a madman's empty promises. She didn't try to fight his clones. She closed her eyes, extending her senses, feeling the subtle differences in their Ryutsu. She was a knight, a duelist. She sought the true opponent. Her eyes snapped open, and she vanished. A green blur. She reappeared directly in front of the real Zamari, her blade aimed at his heart. Found you. Their battle became a high-speed chase across the caldera. 2 masters of Sonido pushing the art to its absolute limit. They were phantoms, appearing and disappearing in flashes of light, their blades clashing in the moments between heartbeats. The very air seemed to warp around them. The landscape a blur as Nelliel relentlessly pursued Zamari, her speed and power countering his elusive magic. In the center, Kageyama walked forward, away from the chaos, to meet the descending Shinigami. The black-robed soldiers fanned out, their Zanpakuto drawn, forming a perimeter. Their captain, Kenshin Amagiri, landed softly on the sand, his gaze sweeping over the battlefield. Taking in the Urankar fighting Urankar, the sheer scale of Oasis, the palpable order within the chaos. His expression was stern, analytical, but held a flicker of surprise. This was not the mindless horde he had expected. I am Captain Kenshin Amagiri of the Gote 13, he announced, his voice calm and authoritative, projecting easily over the din of battle. You are the leader of this settlement. I am, Kageyama replied, stopping 20 feet from him. The fangs of his mask gave him a demonic appearance, a stark contrast to the Shinigami's disciplined austerity. By the laws of Soul Society, Kenshin continued, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana, all hollows are subject to purification. An organized society of Urankar is a Class S threat to the balance of the worlds. Surrender now, and your followers will be granted a swift and merciful purification. Resist, and we will be forced to enact justice. Kageyama let out a short, sharp sound that might have been a laugh. Justice, purification, your laws don't apply here, Captain. This is my land, my kingdom, and your justice sounds a lot like genocide. He gestured to the battle raging around them. As you can see, we have our own problems. I suggest you take your soldiers and go back through your little door before you get caught in something you don't understand. Kenshin's eyes narrowed. Your arrogance is astounding. Do you truly believe you can defy the Gote 13 and Sosuke Aizen at the same time? I don't believe, Kageyama said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I know I can defend my home. This was the final negotiation. The lines were drawn. So be it, Kenshin said, his voice now cold. He drew his Zanpakuto, its blade gleaming in the dim light. The sentence is death. He moved. It wasn't the explosive burst of Sonido. It was Shukuchi, the flash step of a Shinigami master, a movement of pure, refined speed. He appeared before Kageyama, his blade a silver arc aimed at his neck. Kageyama didn't flinch. He met the attack not with a weapon, but with his body. He twisted, the blade grazing his shoulder, and his foot swept out, aimed at Kenshin's knee. It was the unpredictable grace of a master martial artist against the disciplined forms of a master swordsman. Kenshin was forced to disengage, surprised by the sheer fluidity of his opponent's movement. You fight like no hollow I have ever seen. I'm full of surprises, Kageyama said, launching his own attack. He flowed forward, a dance of feints and strikes, his hands and feet a blur. He wasn't using massive power, but pure, unadulterated skill. He was testing the captain, learning his rhythm. Their battle was a stark contrast to the other two. It was quiet, precise, and lethally fast. It was a duel of masters. Kenshin's Zanjutsu was flawless. His blade a wall of impenetrable defense and a spear of perfect offense. But Kageyama's taijutsu infused Sonido was something else entirely. He was formless, unpredictable, a ghost that was everywhere at once. Hado number 33, Sokatsui. Kenshin intoned, firing a massive blast of blue spiritual energy from his palm. Kageyama met it with his own. Rasenseiro. The spiraling vortex of blue-black energy drilled into the Shinigami's spell. They met in the middle, a violent explosion of conflicting power that shook the very ground. Kenshin was thrown back by the sheer concussive force. His sleeves shredded, a look of shock on his face. The Arankar's Sero-like attack hadn't just matched his Kido, it had overpowered it. Your abilities are an anomaly, Kenshin said, landing on his feet. His composure regained but his guard heightened. A fusion of hollow and something else. What are you? I'm the king of this place, Kageyama replied, appearing behind him. He threw a punch aimed at the back of Kenshin's head. The captain whirled, blocking with the flat of his blade, the impact sending a shockwave through his arms. The Arankar's physical strength was monstrous. Kenshin realized he could not win this battle with his sealed blade. You are a worthy opponent, he said, a note of respect in his voice. I shall honor you by using my full power. Bankai. He held his sword before him. And the world seemed to hold its breath. Bankai. Tenpenchi Rugen, cataclysmic dragon's eye. His Zanpakuto dissolved into light, which then reformed. His blade remained a simple katana. But the air around him began to shimmer and distort. 4 massive, translucent orbs of crackling energy, each representing a different element. Earth, wind, fire, and water, appeared, orbiting him like malevolent moons. His Ryutsu skyrocketed, becoming a maelstrom of controlled elemental fury. This is the power that judges the unbalanced, Kenshin declared, his voice echoing with the force of his Bankai. By my authority as a captain of the Gotei 13, I will return you to the cycle. He pointed his blade at Kageyama, and the fiery orb shot forward, transforming into a colossal dragon made of pure flame. Kageyama watched the dragon approach, its heat so intense it turned the sand to glass. He could have dodged, he could have countered with a massive Rasenseiro. But he knew this was a test. This was a battle for respect, a declaration of power. He had to meet it head-on. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in this fight, he unleashed his own resurrection. He didn't shout a command phrase. He just let the power flow. A pillar of pure, golden light erupted from him, so bright and warm it felt like a sun had just been born in the heart of Hueco Mundo. The oppressive twilight was banished, replaced by a radiant dawn. His mask didn't grow or change. It dissolved completely, revealing his full face, his features now sharper, more refined, his whisker-like birthmarks stark against his skin. His tattered hakama was replaced by a pristine white coat, similar to a captain's haori, trimmed with black flames, over a simple black uniform. In his hand, he held a new blade, a simple, elegant chikudo. A straight single-edged sword, its blade glowing with the soft, golden light of a sunrise. This was his resurrection, Kyokujitsuken rising sun blade. It did not make him more bestial. It made him more refined, more kingly. It was the embodiment of his unique soul, a fusion of his original, sun-like chakra and the spiritual power of this new world. He looked at the approaching fire dragon. And he swung his blade. It was a simple, clean arc. From his sword, a wave of golden energy erupted, not as a chaotic blast, but as a perfectly controlled crescent of light. It struck the fire dragon head-on. There was no explosion. The golden light simply unmade the flames, consuming them, erasing them from existence as if they had never been. Silence. Kenshin Amagiri stared, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. His Bankai, one of the most powerful elemental forces in Soul Society, had been nullified. Effortlessly. The Arankar before him, he wasn't a hollow. He wasn't a Shinigami. He was something else entirely. A third thing. A god of a different pantheon. But as Kageyama stood there in his released form, a frown creased his brow. He felt a flicker, a stutter in the flow of his own energy. He glanced at Kenshin's remaining elemental orbs, and then at the ground. He could feel it again, that deep, unsettling wrongness from beneath the sand. The Void King's prison, Kenshin's powerful, ordered Kido and Bankai, the sheer spiritual structure of his abilities, it was behaving erratically, being subtly warped by the ambient nothingness that seeped from the ground. His own power, a perfect fusion of two worlds, felt it most keenly, like a discordant note in a perfect symphony. It was a small weakness, but it was there. And it told him that the Void King's influence was growing, beginning to affect even the fundamental laws of spiritual combat. He didn't have time to dwell on it. He moved, his speed in his released form beyond anything he had shown before. He wasn't a blur. He had simply ceased to be in one place and appeared in another. He was in front of Kenshin, his golden blade at the captain's throat. Kenshin hadn't even had time to register his movement. He was frozen, the cold edge of the glowing sword a hair's breadth from his skin. He was defeated, in a single move. "This battle is over, Captain," Kageyama said, his voice calm, but with an underlying authority that was absolute. "I could kill you right now. I could wipe out every one of your men. But I won't." He lowered his blade slightly. "My kingdom has no quarrel with Soul Society. We are not Aizen. We are a sanctuary for those who wish to live in peace. Take your men and go. Report what you've seen here. Tell them that a third power has risen in Hueco Mundo. We can be allies, or we can be enemies. The choice is yours." He wasn't just winning a fight. He was dictating the terms of the war. Kenshin stared into Kageyama's impossibly blue eyes, seeing not the malice of a hollow, but the conviction of a king. He saw the truth in his words. He had been defeated, utterly and completely, yet his life was being spared. This was not the action of a monster. It was the action of a statesman. With a deep, humbling breath, Kenshin sheathed his Zanpakuto, his Bankai dissolving. "Retreat," he commanded, his voice ringing with an authority his soldiers instantly obeyed. "All forces, withdraw." The Shinigami, who had been locked in a fierce battle with Oasis's defenders, disengaged, their expressions a mixture of confusion and relief. They fell back, creating a portal back to their world. As Kenshin turned to leave, he paused. "This isn't over," he said, his gaze complex. "You are an anomaly that Soul Society cannot ignore. But I will deliver your message. And I will report on the strange interference that plagued my abilities here. There is something wrong with this land, something that affects the very laws of Ryutsu." He gave a final, grudging nod of respect, and then stepped through the Garganta, which sealed behind him, leaving only the Arankar of Aizen's forces. Kageyama's resurrection faded, returning him to his normal state, the golden light receding, his fox jaw mask reforming over his mouth. The fight had been won not through annihilation, but through an overwhelming show of power and a surprising act of mercy. He turned just in time to see the conclusions of the other two battles. Harribel and her Fracken had systematically cornered Grimjow, trapping him in a vortex of high-pressure water. Her ultimate attack, Cascada, WH. It battered and crushed him into submission. He lay defeated in a crater, his resurrection broken, unconscious. Nelliel, in a final, dazzling display of speed, had appeared behind Zamari, her lance not aimed to kill, but to disable. A precise strike to his shoulder and another to his leg severed the spiritual pathways controlling his movement. He collapsed, his vaunted speed useless, defeated by a warrior who was not only his equal in speed, but his superior in combat. In a matter of minutes, the three-pronged attack had been utterly dismantled. Two Espada and their forces lay defeated. Shish. Inagami captain and his army were in full retreat. Oasis stood victorious. Their king and queens had defended their home, not just with power, but with strategy, compassion, and a startling display of political acumen. They looked out over the battlefield, at their people, who were cheering, their voices rising in a triumphant roar. They had faced down the two greatest powers in the cosmos, and they had won. But as he looked at the distant, retreating forms of the Shinigami, and the unconscious bodies of Aizen's elite, Kageyama felt no triumph. He only felt the cold certainty of what was to come. He hadn't ended a war. He had just officially declared it. And beneath his feet, he could feel the silent, patient stirring of the true enemy, the one that didn't want to conquer worlds, but to unmake them entirely. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Whispering Void. The victory on two fronts established Oasis as an undeniable power. Aizen's forces retreated to Las Noches to lick their wounds, their bravado shattered. Soul Society, reeling from Captain Amagiri's shocking report, fell into a period of tense debate and observation. For the first time, a fragile, unspoken truce settled over the white sands. It was not peace, but a lull. The deep breath before the plunge. This quiet, however, was more unnerving than open war. The true enemy, the one Kageyama had felt stirring, began to make its presence known. It started subtly. Patches of the desert, normally a tapestry of varied bone whites and grays, began to lose their texture, their color, turning a uniform, featureless, matte gray. It was as if the very concept of detail was being erased. The crystalline trees in these zones stopped pulsing with their faint inner light, becoming dull, inert things. Then came the madness. Hollows on the fringes of Oasis's territory. Weaker Arankar who patrolled the outer borders, began to exhibit strange behavior. They would stand motionless for hours, staring at nothing. Others would fly into a blind panic, attacking the sand, the sky, their own comrades, screaming about the emptiness. Their ryutsu would flicker and die, not as if it were being drained, but as if it were being unraveled. The most horrific cases were found with their masks cracked open, but instead of a face or spiritual matter beneath, there was only a swirling, starless void, a pocket of absolute nothingness. The reports flooded the command grotto, each one more disturbing than the last. Findor described it with chilling precision. It is a plague of the soul. It does not kill, it erases. Kageyama, Harribel, and Nelliel knew the source. The Void King, the entity sealed beneath their feet. The spiritual pressure unleashed during their three-way battle had been like a hammer blow to its ancient prison, widening the cracks. Its influence was no longer a subtle tremor, it was a poison seeping into the very groundwater of Hueco Mundo. The final portent came one moonless night. The ground of the entire desert trembled, a deep, groaning shudder that was not an earthquake but a shifting of reality itself. Far out in the gray zones, a structure began to rise from the sand. It wasn't built, but revealed. As if the desert were merely a blanket being pulled back. It was a temple, an inverted ziggurat of impossible, non-Euclidean geometry, its black stone seeming to absorb the light around it. Its architecture was alien, painful to look at, its lines and angles whispering maddening secrets to the primitive parts of the brain. At its peak, which was buried deep beneath the sand, was the main seal. This temple was the lock. We can't ignore this any longer, Kageyama said, his voice grim. He, Harribel, and Nelliel stood on a high mesa, observing the distant, light-devouring temple. The air around, it was thick with the chilling absence of ryutsu. This thing, it will consume everything if we let it. Attacking it directly seems foolish, Harribel countered, her strategic mind working furiously. We don't understand it. We don't know its weaknesses. Every Arankar that has gotten close to it has either gone mad or simply ceased to be. Then we can't send an army, Nelliel said, her expression pained. We can't ask our people to face something so horrific. But we can't do nothing. That temple, it feels like a disease, and it's spreading. She's right, Kageyama agreed. This isn't a job for an army. It's a job for us. He looked at the two women who were his world, his heart clenching at the thought of the danger he was about to propose. The three of us, we go there, we find the heart of this thing, and we figure out how to stop it. It's a suicidal risk, Harribel stated, though there was no protest in her voice, only an assessment of fact. Staying here and waiting for the world to be unmade is also suicidal, Kageyama shot back. It's just slower. Nelliel placed a hand on his arm and another on Harribel's. He's right. The three of us, together. That's how we defeated Baragan. That's how we held off Aizen and the Gote 13. It's the only way we'll survive this. Their decision made, they prepared. They left Oasis in the capable hands of Findor and their Fracken, giving strict orders to defend the caldera but not to follow them under any circumstances. Their journey to the temple was a descent into a special kind of hell. The closer they got, the more the world seemed to bleach away. The sounds of the desert died, replaced by a profound and unnerving silence, broken only by a faint, high-pitched ringing that seemed to come from inside their own skulls. The temple loomed before them, a monument to nothingness. There was no grand entrance, only a gaping, perfectly square hole in its base that seemed to lead down into utter blackness. The spiritual pressure inside, Harribel murmured, her senses on high alert, it's not dense. It's negative. It feels like it's pulling our own ryutsu out of us. Stay close, Kageyama ordered, igniting a small, warm, golden sphere of his sun energy in his palm. It didn't illuminate much, the darkness of the temple seeming to drink the light, but it created a small pocket of warmth and reality around them. Keep your own energy focused. Don't let it touch your mind. They stepped inside. The interior was a labyrinth of shifting corridors and impossible staircases that led in circles. The walls were carved with runes and glyphs that writhed and changed when you weren't looking directly at them. The air was cold, thin, and filled with whispers, echoes of despair from forgotten eons. This was not a normal dungeon crawl. The traps were not physical, they were psychological. As they walked down one corridor, the walls seemed to melt away, and Harribel was suddenly back in her past, surrounded by the male Arankar who had betrayed her, their faces sneering, their voices whispering how she was weak, how she would always be abandoned. She faltered, a gasp escaping her lips, her hand flying to her Zanpakuto. But before the illusion could take hold, Kageyama's hand was on her shoulder, his golden energy flowing into her, a warm anchor in the sea of cold memory. It's not real, Harribel, he said, his voice firm. They're gone. I'm here. We're here. She blinked, and the corridor snapped back into place. She took a shuddering breath, her eyes meeting his with a gratitude that went beyond words. She had faced down gods and armies without flinching, but this place attacked the old scars, the wounds of the soul. A few steps later, it was Nelliel's turn. The world dissolved into the cracked desert landscape of her past. And she was a child again, helpless, watching Neutra stand over her broken Fracken, his laughter echoing. The despair, the helplessness, it was overwhelming, threatening to drown her. But a hand took hers. It was Harribel. That is not who you are anymore, Nelliel, the stoic queen said, her voice a surprising anchor of comfort. You are a queen of Oasis. You are our heart, remember that. Nelliel looked up, and the vision shattered. She was back in the dark temple, Harribel's hand holding hers, Kageyama standing as a silent, golden sentinel at her side. Their bond, their family, was their shield. It was the only thing real in this place of lies. They pushed deeper, relying on each other, drawing strength from their connection to fend off the temple's maddening influence. They faced guardians, but not ones of flesh and bone. They were concepts given form, an entity of pure despair that could only be defeated by Nelliel's unwavering hope, a beast of suffocating loneliness that was repelled by the strength of their unified presence. Finally, they reached the central chamber. It was a vast, circular room, and at its center, suspended in the air by chains of black, solidified nothingness, was a heart. It was not a physical heart, but a colossal, cracked crystal, pulsing with a weak, tired, golden light. It was a heart of pure Ryutsu. And Kageyama recognized the energy. It was ancient, unbelievably powerful, but familiar. It felt like his own. Below the heart, on the floor of the chamber, was a circle of complex, interwoven runes, glowing with a faint, flickering silver light. This was the seal, and it was failing. Cracks spread across its surface like fissures in ice, and from those cracks, the absolute void seeped out. What is this? Nelliel whispered in awe and horror. The walls of the chamber began to glow, the writhing runes slowing, coalescing into images, a story unfolding before them. It was a history of a time, before the three worlds. They saw a singular, primordial cosmos, a sea of chaotic, indifferentiated energy. And within it, two equal and opposite forces came into being. One was a being of pure creation, of will, of existence. It gathered the chaos, gave it form, and sought to build. This was the being who would become the Soul King. The other was a being of pure entropy, of unbeing, of the inevitable slide back to nothingness. The Kukyo no O, the Void King. They saw the two entities wage a war that defined reality itself. The Soul King would create stars, the Void King would unmake them. The Soul King would forge souls. The Void King would erase their very concept. It was a war that could not be won, only perpetuated, a cosmic stalemate that threatened to tear the fabric of everything apart. Finally, the Soul King, in a great, desperate gamble, did not try to destroy his counterpart. He sacrificed the vast majority of his power to create a prison. He tore his own being apart, using his limbs and organs to create the three worlds, Soul Society, the human world, and Hueco Mundo, as the walls of the cell. He used his own heart, the core of his creative power, as the lock. This crystal before them, the power of absolute existence, was the only thing that could contain absolute non-existence. And the Soul King himself, a diminished, mutilated husk, became the linchpin. His consciousness, spread across the three worlds, was what maintained the integrity of the seal. The vision faded, leaving them in the silent chamber, the terrible truth settling upon them like a shroud. The Soul King, Harribel breathed, her mind struggling to process the scale of it. He's not a ruler. He's a cork in a bottle. Aizen's plan, Kageyama said, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. He wants to kill the Soul King and take his place on the empty throne. He thinks it's a throne of power. But if he kills the Soul King, Nelliel's voice was a horrified whisper. The linchpin is removed. The seal shatters completely. This prison, she gestured to the failing runes on the floor, it will break. The full, apocalyptic scope of the situation crashed down on them. Aizen's ambition was not just a threat to the established order, it was a threat to all of existence. He was a fool playing with a cosmic trigger, utterly ignorant of the gun it was attached to. If Aizen succeeded, the Void King would be released, and everything, Shinigami, hollow, human, the very concepts of life and death, hope and despair, would be unmade. Erased, returned to the perfect, silent nothingness that came before. This presented them with a terrible, impossible choice. They could stand aside, let Aizen and the Gote 13 destroy each other. If Aizen won, the universe ended. If the Gote 13 won, they would inevitably turn their purifying gaze back on Oasis, and a new war would begin. Or they could intervene. We have to stop him, Kageyama said, his voice heavy with the weight of worlds. We have to stop Aizen. Stop him, Harribel argued, her expression a mask of bitter irony. You mean save them? Save the Shinigami who came to our home to exterminate us? Save the very system that declares our existence a sin? You want us to fight and die for our enemies? The moral dilemma was a chasm at their feet. It was one thing to defend their home. It was another entirely to save the people who wanted to burn it to the ground. I don't want to save them, Kageyama shot back, his frustration boiling over. I want to save us. I want to save our home, our people. I want to save you. He ran a hand through his blonde hair, his composure cracking. Look at this place. This is the real enemy. Aizen is just a deluded fool who's about to open the door for it. If we let him, everything we've built, everyone we've fought to protect, will be gone. It won't matter who was right or wrong. There will be nothing left. Nelliel stepped between them, her expression filled with a deep sadness. He's right, Harribel. This isn't about saving Soul Society. It's about preventing the end of everything. What good is our kingdom if there's no world for it to exist in? Harribel was silent, her internal conflict warring on her face. Her every instinct, honed by a lifetime of betrayal, screamed at her to let the Shinigami rot. They deserved it, but the logic was inescapable. The survival of Oasis, her Fracken, her new, strange, and precious family, depended on the survival of the very system that despised them. So what is the plan? She asked finally, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. We march on the fake Karakura town and fight alongside the Gote 13. We announce to them, don't worry, we're here to save you from your own ignorance. No, Kageyama said, his mind already working. Moving past the dilemma to the strategy. We don't fight alongside them. We don't fight for them. We appear as a third power. We solve the entire equation. He looked at the failing seal on the floor. Then at the pulsing heart of the Soul King. His eyes narrowed. This place, this temple, it's a lock. But every lock has a key. And a weakness. He walked toward the crystalline heart. His hand outstretched. As he got closer, his own Ryutsu began to resonate with it. The golden light of his sun energy and the ancient light of the heart pulsing in sync. My power. It's like this. Not identical, but from the same source. The creative principle. The will to exist. What are you saying? Nelliel asked. I'm saying we can't just kill Aizen, Kageyama said, his voice low and intense. The Hogyoku is already remaking him. He's becoming a being on par with the Soul King. If we just kill him, his power might dissipate chaotically and shatter the seal anyway. We need to contain it. We need to use it. Quote, a desperate, insane plan began to form in his mind, a gamble of cosmic proportions. We don't go to Karakura town to stop a war. We go there to hijack it. He looked at them, his partners, his queens, the anchors of his soul. He saw the doubt, the fear, but also the trust. They had followed him this far. I don't know if this will work, he admitted, his honesty a raw and vulnerable thing. We might all die, we might fail, and the universe might end anyway. But I know I can't stand here and do nothing. Not while you two are by my side. The maddening whispers of the temple were still there. But they had lost their power. In the face of their bond, their shared resolve, the encroaching despair found no purchase. They had walked into the heart of nothingness and found their purpose. They were not just the rulers of a small, fledgling kingdom. They were now the unwilling, unthanked guardians of all existence. They emerged from the Black Temple, BLIN King in the familiar twilight of Hueco Mundo. The world seemed different now, more fragile, the white sands a thin veil over an abyss. They looked at each other, the weight of what they had learned, of the decision they had made, settling upon them. The Urankar of Oasis will follow you, Harribel said, her voice firm, her internal conflict resolved into a cold, hard pragmatism. They follow us. If our survival means fighting in the human world, they will fight. They shouldn't have to, Nelliel said softly. This isn't their burden, but it is ours, Kageyama finished. He looked toward the distant horizon, where he could feel the fabric of space twisting, the real Karakura town being switched with Aizen's replica. The final act was beginning. Their brief moment of peace was over. The war on two fronts was about to become a war for reality itself. They were no longer just fighting for their home. They were fighting for the right for anything to exist at all. And they would do it alone. A forgotten kingdom against two different kinds of oblivion. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. 3 Kings, 1 Throne. The sky over the fake Karakura town was a canvas of spiritual warfare. The combined might of the Gote 13 clashed with Sosuke Aizen and his remaining espada, a maelstrom of flashing steel, explosive Kido, and world-shattering resurrections. But Aizen was more than a match for them. He moved through the embattled captains with a serene, untouchable grace, his intellect and power so vast that he seemed to be playing a different game entirely. The Hogyoku, embedded in his chest, pulsed with a malevolent light, evolving him with every passing second, transforming him from a master Shinigami into something else. He had cut down captains like wheat, weathered their Bankai with contemptuous ease, and was now poised to ascend, to strike down the final defenders and march on the real Karakura town, the key to the Soul King's palace lying within his grasp. He was winning, and that was when the world began to break. It did not start with an attack. It started with a sound. A low, resonant crack that was not heard with the ears but felt in the soul. It emanated not from the battlefield, but from the sky above Hueco Mundo, a world away. Yet the sound echoed across dimensions. High above the fake town, a fissure of pure, unadulterated blackness split the sky, a jagged wound in the fabric of reality. From it, a wave of palpable nothingness washed over the battlefield. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The Shinigami faltered, their Kido spells fizzling into sparks, the light of their Zanpakuto dimming. The Urankar stumbled, their Seros becoming weak and diffuse. It was not a suppression of Ryutsu, it was a corrosion of the very laws that governed it. Void's influence didn't care about power levels, it attacked the concept of power itself. Existence was being unmade at a fundamental level. What is this? Captain Commander Yamamoto demanded, his ancient eyes wide with a confusion he had not felt in 1,000 years. Aizen, who had been on the verge of his ultimate triumph, froze. He looked up at the crack in the sky, a frown creasing his brow. Even the Hogyoku's constant evolution seemed to stutter, its energy disrupted by this encroaching entropy. This was an anomaly he had not predicted, a variable that had no place in his perfect equation. Into this sudden, terrified silence, 3 new players arrived. A Garganta tore open between the two warring factions. It was not the ragged, chaotic portal of a normal hollow, but a clean, stable gateway. From it, Kageyama, Harribel, and Nelliel emerged, their presence a sudden, sharp spike of defiant reality in the face of the encroaching void. They were not here as allies. They were not here as enemies. They were here as a solution. Kageyama stood in the center, his fox jaw mask in place, his blue eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to push back the encroaching dread. To his right, Harribel held her Tiburon, her green eyes sweeping over the battlefield, a queen assessing her domain. To his left, Nelliel stood tall, her gentle nature hidden behind the grim mask of A.W. Arrier prepared to make a terrible sacrifice. Behind them, through the Garganta, stood their army, Findor, Apache, Mila Rose, Sun Sun, and the hundreds of Arankar of Oasis, their faces grim, their weapons ready. They were not here to fight the Shinigami. They were here to hold the line. Kageyama. Aizen's voice was sharp, laced with genuine surprise and annoyance. You dare to interfere in my ascension. Your ascension is a fool's errand. Aizen, Kageyama's voice boomed, cutting through the chaos. The throne you seek isn't empty. It's a lock on the cage of a monster that will devour us all. You are about to unleash the end of everything. The Shinigami stared, dumbfounded. The renegade Arankar king they had fought in Hueco Mundo was here, speaking of cosmic threats they couldn't comprehend. He's right, Captain Amagiri said, his voice cutting through his comrades' confusion. He stood wounded but defiant, his gaze locked on Kageyama. In Hueco Mundo, there is something else. Something ancient. We all feel it now. The battlefield had transformed. It was no longer Aizen versus the Gote 13. It was a three-way standoff. The forces of Soul Society, battered and waning. The god candidate Aizen, his plan thrown into disarray. And the kingdom of Oasis, a third power, standing between two forms of oblivion. Harribel, Nelliel, Kageyama said, his voice low, meant only for them. It's time. They nodded. There were no grand speeches. No tearful goodbyes. They had said everything that needed to be said in the quiet of their grotto. This was the brutal calculus of kings. Findor. Harribel's voice rang out, sharp and clear. You have your orders. Hold the line. Do not let that nothingness advance. Protect our world. For Oasis. Findor roared, and behind him, their army echoed the cry. They surged forward, not to attack the Shinigami, but to form a living wall, their combined Ryutsu a desperate bulwark against the tide of uncreation pouring from the crack in the sky. Simultaneously, Harribel and Nelliel moved. They did not attack Aizen. They went for his support. Harribel, moving like a tempest of water and steel, engaged Jin Ichimaru. The smiling fox, who had been observing with lazy amusement, found his nonchalance shattered as Harribel came at him with the full, released fury of a queen defending her world. Your games are over, little fox, she snarled, her blade clashing with his in a shower of sparks. Nelliel, a green comet of righteous power, charged toward the remaining powerful Arankar loyal to Aizen, her Lanceros Verde clearing a path. Her fight was not one of rage, but of desperate mercy, trying to subdue them without killing them, to save them from their master's suicidal folly. The grand battle had shattered into a dozen smaller, desperate conflicts. It was chaos. It was war, and in the center of it all, two figures remained. Kageyama and Sosuke Aizen. So, you have come to play the hero, Aizen said, a sneer twisting his features as the Hogyoku pulsed. Healing his minor wounds and pushing his evolution forward. A chrysalis of white energy began to form around him. You would side with the very insects who wish to exterminate your kind. All for some phantom threat. I'm not on their side, Kageyama said, his own power beginning to rise, a golden aura pushing back against the encroaching void. And I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to surpass you. He vanished. His speed was absolute. He appeared before the half-formed chrysalis, his hand glowing with the spiraling fury of a Rasencero. He slammed it into Aizen's chest. The impact was cataclysmic. The chrysalis shattered, and Aizen was sent hurtling backward, a look of genuine shock on his face. But the Hogyoku was absolute. The wound closed instantly, and his transformation continued. His form becoming more monstrous, a hollow-like creature with wings of bone. A futile effort, Aizen roared, firing a blast of purple Ryutsu so dense it warped space itself. Kageyama met it with a wave of his hand, a wall of his golden sun energy rising to meet the blast. The two forces annihilated each other in a blinding explosion of light and shadow. Their battle was on a scale that dwarfed everything else. It was a clash of gods. They moved faster than sight, their blows cracking the very air, their energy blasts tearing the fake city apart. But Kageyama wasn't just fighting. He was analyzing. He was waiting. He could feel it. The Hogyoku's runaway power. Aizen's burgeoning, unstable godhood. The encroaching, corrosive energy of the Void King. 3 immense, world-breaking forces. All converging on this single point in space-time. This was the moment he had seen in the temple. This was his one, insane chance. Aizen, enraged by this persistent gnat, finally ascended to his ultimate form. He became a being of pure, transcendent power, his features smoothed into an alien serenity, multiple wings of spiritual energy flaring from his back. It is over, his voice echoed, no longer human, but a chorus of divine pronouncements. I stand at the pinnacle. I am a god. Good, Kageyama said, breathing heavily, his body battered but his will unbroken. I was waiting for that. He closed his eyes, and he reached out, not with his fists, but with his soul. He stopped fighting the energies around him and instead began to draw them in. He pulled on the chaotic, wish-granting power of the Hogyoku, hijacking its connection to Aizen. He pulled on the cold, entropic nothingness seeping from the crack in the sky. And he poured his own unique essence, the fusion of shinobi chakra and hollow ryutsu. The power of a transmigrated soul, the golden energy of creation, into the mix. What are you doing? Aizen demanded, feeling a drain, a pull on his new power that he couldn't stop. A king doesn't just destroy, Kageyama grunted, the strain immense, his body starting to crack under the pressure of the conflicting energies. He builds, he protects, he seals. The 3 forces met within him. A trinity of unimaginable power. Creation, evolution, and nothingness. They did not merge. They reacted. A violent, transcendental alchemy that threatened to tear him apart from the inside out. He let out a roar of pure, unadulterated agony and will, and he unleashed it. It was not an attack. It was a judgment. A column of swirling, tricolored energy, gold, indigo, and pure black, erupted from him, shooting straight up toward the crack in the sky. It was a spear forged from the fundamental forces of the universe. It struck the fissure, and instead of widening it, the energy began to weave itself into the edges of the tear. The gold of creation provided the structure. The indigo of evolution provided the dynamic, adaptive strength. And the black of the void provided the anchor. A concept binding nothingness to nothingness. He was not trying to destroy the Void King. He was using its own power against it, forging a new, perfect, and eternal lock. And every lock needs a key. Aizen, Kageyama roared, turning the full force of the energy backlash on his opponent. Aizen, his godhood now a liability, a massive source of the very energy Kageyama was manipulating, was caught in the torrent. The Hogyoku, recognizing a greater wish, the desire of existence to continue existing, betrayed him, funneling his power into the seal. No, this cannot be. I am a god, Aizen screamed, his transcendent form beginning to break apart, his power siphoned away to become the core of the new seal. He was being turned into the key. Kageyama held nothing back. He poured every last drop of his life force, his will, his very soul into the final push. He was the forge, Aizen was the metal, and the fate of the universe was the weapon being shaped. With a final, deafening boom that transcended sound, the process was complete. The crack in the sky sealed over, leaving behind a complex, shimmering lattice of tricolored light, a new constellation in the eternal night. Aizen, his power drained, his form regressing, fell from the sky, defeated not by brute force, but by having his own ambition turned into the instrument of his imprisonment. The Hogyoku, its purpose served, fell silent. And Kageyama, he collapsed, his body broken, his ryutsu almost completely gone. He had given everything. The void was gone. The oppressive silence was replaced by the sounds of the wind, of the distant, dying battles. The Shinigami and Arankar stared at the sky, then at the fallen forms of their respective gods, their minds unable to grasp the cosmic drama that had just unfolded. Harribel and Nelliel felt the shift, the sudden release of pressure, the victory. They ended their own battles, Jin retreating with a final, unreadable smile, and they rushed to Kageyama's side. They found him lying in a crater, his body steaming, his life fading. Cage, Yama, Nelliel sobbed, cradling his head in her lap. He opened his eyes, his brilliant blue now faint. He looked up at them, his queens, his family. He managed a weak, tired smile. We win. You did it, Harribel said, her voice thick with emotion, her hand gripping his. You saved everything. Good, he whispered, his eyes starting to close. That's all that matters. His consciousness faded into darkness. He awoke to the smell of sterile air and the soft beeping of a machine he didn't recognize. He was in a bed. Clean white sheets covering him. He slowly sat up. His body ached, but it was whole. His ryutsu was low, a mere fraction of what it had been, but it was stable, slowly, painstakingly regenerating. He was in a clean, white room. Through a large window, he could see the impossible sight of a blue sky and white clouds. The door slid open. Captain Kenshin Amagiri stepped inside, followed by the wizened Captain Commander Yamamoto. You are awake, Yamamoto said, his voice a low rumble. That is fortunate. Kageyama looked at them, then at his hands. Where am I? You are in a secure medical facility within the Seraite, Kenshin explained. After your actions, we brought you here. Your two queens are in the adjoining suite. They have refused to leave your side. Aizen has been sentenced to an eternity in the deepest level of Muken, Yamamoto stated. The threat is over. He paused, his ancient eyes studying Kageyama with a new, complex light. You saved us. You saved all of us. And we do not know what to do with you. Let me go, Kageyama said simply. Let us go home. It is not that simple, Kenshin said. You are the single most powerful entity in the three worlds now. Even in your weakened state, you command an army of Arankar. Soul Society cannot simply ignore that. A tense silence filled the room. But it was broken by the door sliding open again. Harribel and Nelliel entered, their expressions fierce and protective. He is not a prisoner, Harribel said, her voice cold steel. And we are not negotiating. He is our husband, Nelliel added, our voice soft but with an unbreakable core of iron. He is our king. We are going home. Yamamoto looked at the three of them, the exhausted but defiant king, the stoic, unyielding queen, and the compassionate but fierce warrior. He saw not monsters, but a family. A power block that could not be broken by force or by law. He had lived for millennia. He knew when to bend. Very well, he said, a decision of historic proportions. A truce. An official truce between the Gote 13 and the nation of Oasis. You are a third pillar. An independent power. We will not interfere in your affairs, so long as you do not interfere in ours. It was a concession born of necessity and a deep, grudging respect. The journey back to Oasis was a triumph. The Garganta opened not in the desolate sands, but in the heart of the caldera, where their entire kingdom was waiting. A roar of celebration erupted as their three rulers emerged, weary and scarred, but victorious. They had defended their home and, in the process, had secured its future. The story ends weeks later. Las Noches, the Palace of Despair, had been claimed. Its dark corridors were being purified, cleansed by Kageyama's golden light, its oppressive atmosphere replaced by one of hope. It was now the capital of Oasis, a symbol not of what was, but of what could be. Kageyama, Harribel, and Nelliel stood on the high balcony of the central spire, looking out over their domain. The white desert stretched to the horizon, but it no longer felt empty or hostile. It was theirs, a kingdom built on a principle, forged in battle, and saved by a sacrifice. Kageyama's power was slowly returning, but it was different now. It was intrinsically tied to the great seal he had created, his own soul a part of the lock that kept oblivion at bay. He was a guardian, a king, a living anchor for reality itself. He felt Harribel's hand slide into his, her touch firm and reassuring. On his other side, Nelliel leaned her head against his shoulder, her presence a constant warmth. He was not alone. He would never be alone again. As they stood there, a strange and beautiful thing happened. On the horizon of Hueco Mundo, for the first time in recorded history, the sun began to rise. It was not the real sun of the human world, but a manifestation of Kageyama's own power, a consequence of his new connection to the very fabric of existence. A golden, hopeful light washed over the white sands, casting long shadows from the crystalline trees, chasing away the perpetual night. A new day was dawning, both literally and figuratively. They were weary, they were scarred, but they were together. A family of kings, a trinity of rulers, ready to build their future under the light of their own sun. Chapter 7 End.